In the dream, I lay on snow like jade in the clear void, a male chanted the words. Another voice continued, looking back on the mortal world, 1,000 years have passed. Singing in the northern wind and laughing in the sky, a female voice chanted, I return to the peak of Taixi and seek Dao. 4 figures stood at the top of the gate, which was so high that it looked like a sharp sword piercing into the clouds. People looked up and saw 4 celestial-looking cultivators standing there with their robes flapping and hair and beard fluttering in the wind. They looked like immortals descending into this world. Ha 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 ha. Inside the Taixi faction, celestial clouds and mist floated around the mountains as if some immortals were living in here. I'm surprised that Su, Chen, Kang, and Dao, these 4 elders, have come out of seclusion cultivation today. Excellent. An old man wearing a fluttering white robe with golden patterns flew over on a golden cloud with a group of cultivators. The old man who was wearing a white robe in the middle of the group was Your Holiness. Bullet comments flooded the big screens in the Origins Internet Club. Smooth. They are actually reciting poems when they came out. F***ck. They look so cool. It's indeed a major faction with all its celestial clouds and auspicious creatures. I have a bad feeling for the shop owner. Meanwhile, the audience in the half-city shop were watching the scene, sitting on the couch. Black Demon said, this faction looks f***ing awesome. Wang Lingxiao, the Zika spiritual master, and Tianxu Daoist looked at each other. Hiss. How come this faction looks even grander than ours? People like Mo Xian and Yu Yan were whispering to each other. I thought they only had the Wu Vi Daoist alliance over there. How come they have such a powerful faction? It's said to be one of the most ancient factions in that continent. Do you think the shop owner will be in trouble? I hope not. However, the shop owner once crashed while he took us flying. What can he do then? He can run with the sword control technique. They won't be able to catch him. Shut up. Obviously, they began to worry when they saw this scene. At this moment, standing high at the top of Taixi faction's gate, King Xiu, who was wearing a tall hat, said, the warrior of the early stage Emperor Warrior Realm doesn't deserve your attention. Let me deal with them. The mountain gate is guarded by white and black, right? I wonder if those 2 old guys have gotten dumb with too much chess playing that they couldn't stop warriors of such a low realm. Liao Chen said with contempt. Your Holiness said with a smile, thank you, King Xiu spiritual master. The Daoist with the high hat waved the Daoist whisk in his hand and said in a cold voice, you 2 can fight me together. Let me see what abilities you have. After all, his cultivation strength had reached level 7 of the Divine Ocean Realm, which was more than enough to deal with a warrior of the early stage of the Emperor Warrior Realm. Meanwhile, the bullet comments flooded the big screens in Origin Internet Club. Awesome! When can I be as awesome as you? He dares to battle both Senior Nalan and Mr. Fang at the same time? So arrogant! A gust of wind lifted the King Xiu spiritual master into the air, and he beckoned at the 2 guys standing on the step. Come on! Before he could finish his words, a figure shot toward him while stepping on a flying sword at a speed unimaginable to ordinary cultivators. Before the King Xiu spiritual master could react, a pot-sized fist expanded before his eyes swiftly until it covered his whole face. Ah! With a shrilling scream, a figure was knocked down from the sky like a cannonball. Boom! The crash put a huge crater in the steps on the mountain path. A figure struggled up from the huge crater with gritted teeth. His protective spiritual light barrier shattered, and he had a dark purple fist-shaped bruise on his face while his nose had become crooked. Ha 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 ha! The cultivators of the Taixi faction are so lame. This lame guy dares to take on both Senior and the shop owner. The cultivators in the Origin Internet Club laughed so hard that they had stitches in their sides. Nalan Hongguo beckoned at the 4 of them. All of you! Come together! All the cultivators of the Taixi faction were stupefied. The King Xiu spiritual master wiped the blood from his face and said with a wicked expression, I indeed underestimated you. But you dare to take on the four of us at the same time. Form the four-symbol grand array. At his sharp shout, the other three deists answered with clear and long yells. Chongyang position. Where are the disciples for the Chongyang position? Furious, King Xu roared and leaped up into the sky while disciples gathered under him. Shaoyang position. Liao Chen flew down from the high mountain gate and took the second position. Disciples for the Shaoyang position. Changyin position. Sheyin position. At the order of King Xu, the disciples stood in formations. Instantly, violent winds rose, and the clouds surged while Nalan Hongguo and Fang Qi stood under the eye of the storm. The moment that the array was formed, a horrifying suppressive aura crashed down on them. More astonishing was that the array emptied all the spiritual essence around them, which meant that it was impossible to absorb spiritual essence from nature, let alone borrow the heavenly power. Do you see this? King Xu sneered after he was sure that these two people were trapped in the array. But don't panic. What you see now is just a fraction of the power of the four-symbol grand array. In this array, you can't use the essence of the surroundings, let alone draw power from the heaven and the earth. I'll see how you can fight with us. Nalan Hongguo looked at Mr. Fang, and the latter shrugged. It seems that I can't use the godly sword lightning controlling true spell anymore. In the Origins Internet Cafe, really? The godly sword lightning controlling true spell is restricted. They are despicable. They are using the full strength of their faction against Mr. Fang and Senior Nalan. They even formed an array. Shame on them. Ha 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 ha. King Xu laughed wildly and said, You dare to take on all of us? I will satisfy your request. Your Holiness stroked his beard calmly and said with a nod, They overestimated themselves. It seems I don't have to show my hand. With a flick of his sleeves, he turned around and didn't care to watch any more. Let's go. Yes, Master. The moment that the words were said, Your Holiness felt a horrifying soul-shaking sword spirit spreading all over the sky. The terrifying sword spirit seemed to come from hell, and one trace of it could send chills down people's spines. Master! Then, he heard a scream of alarm. My body, how come I can't move? Nalan Hongguo yelled, You dare to look down on warriors. Today, I'll show you my world-ending sword 23. 3. However, in the next moment, his smile froze on his face. He saw the violent gusts of wind suddenly freezing in the air around the center of the big array. Instantly, the spiritual spells, spiritual light, and even the entire array stopped moving. The dancing lightning bolts froze in the air, and the surging flood hovered in the sky strangely even though it didn't freeze into ice, it just stayed there, not moving at all. It wasn't flowing, and no water droplets fell from it. Nalan Hongguo emitted a layer of crystal light all over his body, looking extremely weird. In this instant, everything seemed to have paused in the long river of time that was flowing forward without stopping. What is this? If they could open their mouths, they would yell in horror. But at this moment, they couldn't even open their mouths as if their bodies were not in their control. As for the cultivators who hovered in the air under the support of spiritual essence, they didn't fall from the sky even though the spiritual essence in their bodies had stopped circulating, they just froze in mid-air, as stiff as stone statues. Their faces froze before they could reveal any horror, but the intense gloominess in their eyes showed the panic and fear inside. With extreme shock, they watched the white-haired old man stroll up to them casually. The sharp sword energies spread out as if it could cut open everything in the world, but no blood was seen spilling out. The sky had darkened, turning this place into a pitch-black space. The shadow of death engulfed everyone. This was Sword 23, which looked like the Grim Reaper was entering the mortal world. Even the audience in the shops could sense the horrifying sword spirit from the screens, let alone the cultivators in front of the gate of BTIC faction. Seeing Nalan Hongguo walking closer, King Xu and the others desperately wanted to attack but found that they couldn't move their bodies or even their spiritual essence. No one could believe that the scene before them was truly happening, neither could one imagine that this attack was cast by a warrior. However, in front of the undeniable fact, all the cultivators of the Taxa faction had to admit that this man who brought them endless horror was a warrior that they had looked down upon. This was the power of Sword 23. Once it was cast, everything lost the right to live, and everything had to wait to be butchered. It was a horrifying technique that could even suppress the laws of space. This period of time seemed very long, as if 10,000 years had passed, and they had come to the end of time. Even Your Holiness had a deep chill in his eyes, feeling as if a surge of cold air ran up from his spine to his skull. The power was so horrifying that it went beyond his imagination. Is this guy still a warrior? How can such a horrifying warrior exist in the world? At this moment, a yellow butterfly flew out of Your Holiness' body and landed on his shoulder. At a closer look, one could see that the butterfly looked like it was made of yellow jade. Your Holiness acquired it from the depth of the cultivation realm, and it was one of his best trump cards. With the help of this yellow jade butterfly, which was said to be related to an ancient fallen immortal, and since he stood at the very edge of this horrifying hell, he had a chance to flee. When Sword 23 was finished, most of the disciples gathered before the mountain gate, the four-symbol grand array including Daoist Su, Chen, Kang, and Dao, and even the whole mountain gate was destroyed. My! Your Holiness looked at the scene before him with horror. He hadn't imagined such an end only 1 moment ago. My Taxa faction lost almost half of its elites here. Hurry! Like a fish out of water, Your Holiness panted frantically. Hurry! Open the faction guarding grand array. While yelling hysterically, he took out his communication jade with a terrified expression. All of his previous calmness was gone. The audience in Origin's internet club broke into loud cheers. Awesome! So powerful! I guess this old guy is so scared that his head is not working. Black Demon, Wang Lingxiao, and the other cultivators who hadn't watched Wind and Cloud yet were stunned. What is this technique? Is he really just a warrior? Terrified, Tang Yuan immediately sent a bullet comment. How come warriors over there are so powerful? But the warriors in our region are so weak. I recommend you to watch Wind and Cloud. So do I. I'm surprised that Senior has mastered the Old Sword Saint's Sword 23. Warriors including Jiwu commented, its power is a little less than the strike used by the Old Sword Saint. Otherwise, no one could leave this place alive. Meanwhile, a pair of eyes suddenly opened in the depth of Taxa faction. This black-clothed cultivator emitted an abyss-deep aura, and he was the tall, black-robed old man who had once sat beside Your Holiness by the lake. This sword spirit is so horrifying. His face turned dark. How come my Taxa faction has made such a powerful enemy? He was holding an 8-trigram disc which emitted waves of mysterious and mystical spiritual light. Meanwhile, stars surged in the sky above the Taxa faction as if the circulation of energy in the array pulled on many stars in the high sky. Under the guidance of the array, many spiritual light beams condensed into huge beams of spiritual essence before crashing down from the stars. The spiritual essence in the earth also gathered and rose until a tremendous amount of spiritual essence surged up tempestuously in the space between the heaven and the earth. Faction guarding Grand Array. Why is the faction guarding Grand Array activated? What happened? Darkness engulfed the faction gate, but the disciples of the Taxa faction on other peaks saw huge beams of spiritual essence shooting down from the sky. It has been thousands of years since the faction guarding Grand Array was last activated. Everyone in the Taxa faction turned their gazes to this place. They had never imagined that their faction would be forced into such a tight corner by a warrior. Obviously, the Taxa faction had realized the power of its enemies and had thus activated its full force. On the high platform, there was a spiritual artifact that was attached to a piece of equipment which looked like an iron helmet. A couple of cultivators hustled forward a cultivator in the line and pushed him up to the platform. Put it on. No. No. It was a young disciple who was about 17 years old, and he was wearing a pale grey robe. He looked at the item before him with a horrified expression and shrunk his body. It seemed like he had experienced something horrifying before and didn't want to repeat it. At this moment, the two grand cultivators of the true lake realm standing on both sides of him sneered and looked at each other. Then, they grabbed his arms and sealed his spiritual essence, which was only at the Yuan River Realm, with their own powerful cultivation base before pressing him down on the high platform. Tian Liza looked at the scene without showing any emotions. This guy has a lot of poison remaining in his body, which is why he is resisting so much. It seems that he needs more time with this lightning treatment. He showed a genial smile and said, "Little guy, you must cooperate with the healing process if you want to recover soon. After we remove most of the poison in your body, I will alleviate the treatment intensity. Do you understand?" Then, he waved his hand and said, "Begin." "No. No." While struggling, the disciple was pushed up. Soon, everyone heard a series of shrilling screams. Despicable! Extremely despicable! Su Tianji's beautiful eyes were full of fury. She had never felt so furious before in her life. She had heard from Mr. Fang that the Taixi faction had imprisoned the disciples but didn't know anything beyond that. Now, watching this scene, her heart turned cold. What are they doing? Even criminals are not tortured in this inhumane way. These disciples were mostly 17 or 18 years old, the perfect age for cultivation. Furthermore, they were not ordinary disciples but highly talented ones. They would grow into excellent cultivators even if they couldn't become core disciples. They would receive extra care and help even if they were at the Liu Yundaist palace. They represented the future of their respective factions. No. No. At this moment, a girl's sobbing and fearful voice sounded. Su Tianji looked toward it and saw a round-faced girl who was about 16 years, despair was written all over her face. Such a talented young female disciple would be doted by her senior brothers and master. But obviously, Tian Liza didn't have any pity for her, and he waved his hand. "Ah! Stop!" A furious yell came. Someone broke in. "Stop her!" Gloomy-faced, Tian Liza didn't know how this intruder had entered this place, but his top priority was catching her. Meanwhile, huge beams of spiritual essence connected the heaven and the earth, and the tremendous spiritual essence from different mountains of the Taixi faction came together and formed a huge, perfect array. Seeing this, Your Holiness, who had just fled from the horrifying sword spirit, felt relieved. He turned his head and saw Nalan Honggu's pale face, and he laughed and said, "It seems that the technique you used consumed a lot of your warrior qi. After all, it's not easy for you to deal with a big array formed by 4 cultivators of the late stage of the divine ocean realm, right? What a pity! Indeed. It's a pity that I didn't kill you, old B*****. Nalan Honggu snorted. Obviously, he had just understood Sword 23, and the power was limited. Although he had broken the 4-symbol Grand Array and killed many masters of the Taixi faction, Your Holiness had escaped with the help of a rare treasure, which was a surprise to Nalan Honggu. That's not what I meant. Your Holiness shook his head slowly. You're only an emperor warrior, but you almost killed me here. You are the number 1 warrior in the entirety of history, and I don't expect that there will be another warrior as powerful as you in the future. Even I am jealous of you. If you don't die, you will probably change the power dynamic between cultivators and warriors on this continent for about 1,000 years. As an emperor warrior who was at the 7th realm for warriors, you possess the same combat ability as a cultivator of the same realm. The 7th realm, Divine Palace Realm. His face turned dark while he snickered. But today, you will die here. Die here. Nalan Honggu sneered. You are almost running out of your strength. Your Holiness stared at him and said coldly, "Do you still want to resist us? Or?" His gaze turned to Fang Qi as if he was looking at an ant. "Do you really expect this wastrel at the Grand Ancestral Warrior Realm, 2 realms lower than yours, to help you escape?" The moment that he finished his sentence, a lot of surging spiritual essence in the sky formed a huge 8-trigram pattern which covered the whole Taxa faction. Seeing that the huge 8-trigram pattern was made, Your Holiness laughed wildly. Do you see that? This is the 8-trigram pattern that I inherited from the prehistoric immortal Dao. It can even trap the legendary demi-immortals who are ready to ascend, let alone you, an emperor warrior. Of course, he exaggerated a bit. After all, this array was created long ago, and the successors could understand just a tiny part of its power, which meant that it was hard for them to unleash its full force. Despite all this, it was more than enough to deal with an emperor warrior who had little warrior qi left in his body. Nalan Hongyu glanced at Fang Qi and said in a deep voice, "Kid Fang, it's time to go. Elder Su must have done her job now. Go now." Mr. Fang shook his head and said, "Didn't I state my intention?" "What intention?" Nalan Hongyu was nonplussed. "I told you guys my intention before we came," Mr. Fang said. "I asked you who wanted to come with me to raise the Taxa faction to the ground." "What? So arrogant!" Instantly, the cusses of Taxa faction disciples resonated in the sky. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang glanced at his godly weapon fragments and the godly weapons trading list. Immortal Slaying Ancient Sword Fragment, Single Usage. Allow the user to achieve complete synchronization with a character in the TV series Jade Dynasty. Required total synchronization 20%. Kusanagi Sword, the King of Fighters, Fragment, Single Usage. Allow the user to achieve complete synchronization with a game character who had used Kusanagi Sword. Required total synchronization 20%. Wuchen Sword Fragment. Heavenly Mirror Fragment. Yes. This was what the system meant when it told Mr. Fang to explore himself. We have made a new episode of New Arrivals preview on our YouTube channel, so please help us out by checking it out. youtube.be/6glvj4waf high right (). This comment didn't increase spirit stone cost, laughing face, fing, what should I choose this time? Mr. Fang stroked his chin. Since we're on the live stream, and the audience in Half City Shop have already seen Sword God, maybe I will use something new today. Kid Fang, what are you waiting for? Nalan Hongyu saw that Fang Qi was still hesitant. At this moment, Your Holiness flew to the 8-trigram platform outside the Taxa Palace. Holding an order flag which was embroidered with symbols of water, wood, wind, and fire. He pointed it to the south and said, "Lee position. Burning Sun True Flame." A wave of horrifying burning flames poured down from the huge 8-trigram disc in the sky as if the Grand Supreme Deist knocked over his 8-trigram furnace. TL note, Grand Supreme Deist is a famous immortal in traditional Chinese legends. The horrifying red flames swept all over the space and even turned the surrounding air on fire. Nalan Hongyu's face turned dark since he could sense the horrifying high temperature even from afar. The flames felt so hot that they seemed like they could melt people instantly. The flames pouring down from the sky would burn the two people on the ground to ashes in the next moment. With a chilly expression, Your Holiness was determined to kill them and remove all potential future trouble. He began to smile while he saw the scene. "Even though you are the most talented and most powerful warrior I've ever seen, you must die here today. I can't let such a huge threat escape from me. It doesn't matter how powerful you are, you can't withstand the burning sun true flame. Go to hell." However, at this moment, Fang Qi suddenly revealed a sword fragment in his hand while a row of mystic data flashed in his eyes. Then, Fang Qi robe fluttered even though there was no wind, his black hair turned white, and it waved in the air as well. His eyes opened slowly, emitting chilly spiritual light. His golden snake pupils contained endless darkness which looked like a black void. Like the heavenly Dao, his eyes emitted deep mercilessness and chilliness as if he disregarded everything in the world. As if supported by an invisible force, he hovered silently in the air, disregarding any rules governing the heaven and the earth. This. What's the shop owner doing? I've never seen this before. At this moment, All the audience watching the live stream felt chills running down their spines, even Ruan Ning, who liked to mock Fang Qi, shivered uncontrollably. Standing in the air, Fang Qi suddenly raised his hand. A surge of a horrifying magnetic field appeared, and the force started to cycle around him as he waved his hand. In the blink of an eye, a horrifying black shadow appeared before him. The shadow expanded and contracted alternatively, swallowing the flames like a black hole or a hurricane sweeping across the land. That is... Song Qing Feng suddenly yelled in shock, "Shockwave! That's shockwave!" Watching the live stream in concentration while sitting on the couch in Half City Shop, Lu Ningyun and Ning Bai, who had played the King of Fighters, jumped up in shock. Sun shockwave! Almost all the audience yelled in astonishment, "Is this Orakai?" Note: in the legends, the Kusanagi sword was drawn out from the tailbone of Orakai. Boom! With a series of huge noises, the sun shockwave crashed onto the 8-trigram disc in the sky with vicious force. The spiritual patterns of the 8-trigram disc, condensed by many beams of spiritual essence, shook under this strike. It became unstable. Impossible! Your Holiness's face paled as he stared at the white-haired young man who was standing in the air. Who are you?" he roared in horror. The snake pupils sent chills down his spines. However, no one answered him. Your Holiness saw the white-haired young man suddenly dim and then vanish silently. In the next moment, the figure appeared behind him. The figure slightly waved his hand, and a huge, horrifying magnetic force rushed out like a storm. Boom! Boom! The moment that Your Holiness turned his head, the dense complicated 8-trigram patterns around his body lit up. These trigram patterns contained most of the array's power, but they shook and looked as if they would fall apart under Fang Qi casual attack. How can it be? Who on earth are you? Not daring to reserve his strength, Your Holiness activated all the power of the Grand Array. Horrifying forces including earth, fire, water, and wind gushed out from the huge 8-trigram disc in the sky. These forces countered and complemented each other, forming an extremely powerful combined force in the array. Meanwhile, the stars moved positions in the sky above the Grand Array while a lot of starlight fell and gathered in the middle of it. "I'll show you the true power of this Grand Array!" Your Holiness roared furiously, and the black-robed old man sitting in the center of the array injected all of his spiritual essence into the 8-trigram disc in his hand. The symbols on the disc moved and gradually derived out the most powerful pattern. The mountains under the Taxa faction shook continuously as if an earth dragon were making a turn. This was the shaking of the spiritual veins underground. Obviously, the person controlling the array had activated most of the spiritual essence from the underground spiritual veins. "Kid Fang, run!" Nalan Hongwu sensed that this force was beyond the resistance of human power. However, at this moment, a huge crack opened in the dark clouds behind Fang Qi, who was still hovering in the air. Meanwhile, Fang Qi brought his arms to his chest and crossed them. All the people stared at the scene in horror. "This is..." The players who had played the King of Fighters shouted, "This is the starting move of Orakai Divine Light." Meanwhile, Fang Qi lips slightly moved as if he was chanting a mysterious and incomprehensible incantation. But strangely, everyone could understand the meaning of the words. "Let everything return to nothing." In the sky covered by gloomy clouds and howling wind, the opening grew larger and larger as if the sky was cracking open. Many light beams shot down, and everything was bathed in the sunlight. The audience watched while the huge 8-trigram disc in the sky, including the derived forces of earth, fire, water, and wind, was cut and disintegrated. Around Your Holiness, the trigram patterns condensed by the array dimmed at a visible speed. He had never looked so terrified before. "You! Impossible! Impossible! No! Impossible!" Your Holiness roared, "This is an ancient grand array passed down from the prehistoric times. The ancestral master told us that it could even trap and kill demi-immortals." "Impossible! Absolutely impossible," he murmured to himself, looking crazy and mad. Then, he saw something even more terrifying. A crack appeared in the center of the huge 8-trigram pattern, which was purely condensed by spiritual essence. Then, more cracks appeared, 2, 3, 4. Many cracks appeared, and the entire array was shaking. The disciples and elders of the other two saint factions, Xianzhong Manor and Yuxu Mountain, all looked up at the terrifying scene in the distant sky in horror. It looked as if the end of the world had come. What is that? That's in the direction of BTIC faction. Seeing this scene, extreme horror and shock entered their eyes. In the half-city shop and the Zhuhua city shop, the cultivators and warriors who hadn't played the King of Fighters before stood up in horror. What is that? Even Ning Bai stood up. She had only seen the overwhelming power of Orakai in the game, she couldn't compare it with anything in the real world, thus she couldn't really feel the power of these moves. However, now she saw the Orakai Divine Light technique being used in the real world. The stunning sensation was many times stronger than what she got from the game. Her eyes that were as green as jade stared at the screen while the array was being dismantled. I decided, I'm going to put more effort into practicing the King of Fighters techniques in the future. The Zika spiritual master was also gazing at the big screen without blinking. Yuner, do you know what this technique is? Can we learn it in the shop? How come I've never seen it before? It's because you don't play the King of Fighters, Master, Lu Ningyun said earnestly. Yuner, can you show me how to play the King of Fighters? The Zika spiritual master asked in excitement. If I can merge this technique into our Nanhua heavenly light, she began to dream about the bright future. Ha 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 ha. Destroyed. All destroyed. Do Your Holiness watched while the BTIC faction's faction guarding Grand Array collapsed. Even the mystical yellow jade butterfly which had saved him from the world-ending sword 23 shattered into pieces. With hatred in his eyes, his face was wicked like a ghost, and he fell from the sky, covered in blood. Staring at Fang Qi in the sky with hatred, he said, My BTIC faction has done nothing to you, why are you doing this to us? Aren't you afraid that you will be punished by heaven and struck by lightning? At least from his perspective, the BTIC faction had never messed with Fang Qi in public. I'm here for the disciples of various factions, you imprisoned and are torturing them, Fang Qi said solemnly. What torture? Do Your Holiness roared, Tian Lizi. Where's Tian Lizi? He laughed hysterically and said, You did this because of those lazy wastrels? Today, I'll bring these wastrels to the tomb with my BTIC faction. Tian Lizi. Holiness. Save me, Holiness. At this moment, a figure covered in blood ran over with a terrified expression, chased by hundreds of furious disciples of various factions. Old B** starred, don't run. I'll let you have a taste of the lightning torture. Old B** starred, I treated my master as my father, and the faction treated me as a son. But after today, my heart will feel cold even if I return to them. You destroyed the affection between my master and me that had been built over the past dozens of years. You villains have no right to live. B** starts. The round-faced girl who was about 16 years old yelled in tears, You lied to my dad and made him take me to this place. After the worse-than-death days here, my home and my faction will not be the same to me, no. It's not me. Spotting Do Your Holiness, Tian Liza looked as if he saw his savior. He pointed at Do Your Holiness and said, It's him. He ordered me to do it, it's not my idea. See? He even wants you to die with him. B** starts. Today, I'll give you a taste of lightning torture. Ah! Before Fang Qi could finish making a move, the two people were swallowed by the furious crowd. While spiritual essence turned into lightning energy and flashed in the crowd, shrill screams could be heard all over the mountain. Meanwhile, the spiritual boats of Linglang Mountain followed the instructions given to them by their superior and moved to the designated place. However, they were greeted by a wave of horrifying lightning light. This is the warfare spiritual spells of the Gongshu family. Impossible. Has the Gongsha family entered the war against us? How come, there are arrays around us? No. We fell into a trap. While alarmed yells and shrill screams sounded, the huge group of spiritual boats received great damage under the attacks of the pre-arranged arrays and the AoE spiritual spells cast by the many warships confiscated from the Gongsha family. Quickly send the message. Tell them that we've fallen into a trap. However, they received no reply, and all the messages they sent were lost like a mud doll in the ocean. The cultivators of Jade Hill Mountain didn't set out until the cultivators of Ling Lang Mountain fled and most of the high-level members were captured. The big forces soon ventured into the depths of Dajin like headless flies, doing battles separately rather than attacking Dajin together in unison, which was the optimal strategy. Strange. How come Elder Shui still didn't reply to my message? Jade Hill Mountain Master wondered with the communication jade in his hand. At this moment, noises came from outside, and they heard someone yell, "Listen up! You've been surrounded! Immediately hand over your spiritual artifacts and surrender to us!" What? All the people inside looked displeased. We haven't received any messages yet. Who's making fun of us? After walking out of the palace, they saw about 10 top-level warships of the Gongsha family slowly appearing in the vast blue sky above the city. Meanwhile, in the Taxa faction, the pungent smell of flesh burned by strong lightning permeated the air. You're audacious! 2 powerful auras descended from the sky. With magnificent presences, a man and a woman at the late stage of the divine ocean realm landed. The man wore a purple gold headpiece and a purple daist robe with golden patterns. He looked handsome and valiant. The woman wore a white daist robe with jade patterns. She looked elegant and celestial. They coldly stared at the people before them. Calmly, Mr. Fang lit up a cigarette and said, "You should ask about what they did to drive these furious disciples to do such a thing." He tapped his finger on the cigarette to knock down the ash from the burning end. "Of course, if you want to ignore the cause and avenge them, since your 3 factions move together, I'm here to deal with you at any time." Even with high cultivation strengths, the man and the woman felt chilly inside. It was a sensation that was uncontrollable. Then, remembering the horrifying light shooting down from the sky, they stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do next. Beeb. The task of the power that shocks the world is completed. In the long history, only people of the 3 Saint Gates shocked and dominated over others, not the other way around. Even if there were any people who had ever shocked and dominated the 3 Saint Gates, they only existed in the secret scrolls of the various factions that recorded the incidents of the ancient times. New task, the power that shocks the world task mission: 1. Rescue the players who are being tortured due to playing games in our shop. 2. Establish dominance. Completed. Task description: don't scheme to destroy our shop's business by suppressing the customers. It's time to establish dominance and shock the enemy's. Task reward: prize wheel. Claimed. Without the array drawing power from the heaven and the earth, the sky regained its clearness as the clouds and wind settled down. However, in the clear blue sky, there seemed to be a pair of eyes that was watching the whole incident. This pair of eyes seemed to be there ever since the creation of the universe and hadn't ever moved, but no one had ever noticed them. When Fang Qi led the others out of the Taxa faction, for some reason, he turned his head and looked at the distant sky. However, he didn't see anything extraordinary. The defeated factions must accept the reality and act like it. The cultivators of the major factions and forces had thought that they would capture the Emperor of Dajin, but now they were astonished to find that they had become prisoners. It was unimaginable. Where are the cultivator troops? Where are the battle reports? The old daist of Dragon Sea Daist Palace was especially puzzled. After all, he had acquired his special communication jade from an ancient relic, and it was made of the top-quality ancient spiritual jade, which meant that even big arrays couldn't affect the transmission of his messages. "Kid Jiwu, what do you want?" The Fat Zhu family master roared in a fury. "Do you think that you can sit back and relax after killing us?" Jiwu tossed a list to him and said, this is the list of costs that our Wu-Daist alliance spent on the projects related to this war. If you have no objections, just sign your names on it. After your factions compensate all the damage that you caused to my country, I'll release you guys for sure. Despicable. Shameless. Jade Hill Mountain Master looked at the long list and said, Kid Jiwoo, this is blatant blackmail. Jiwoo ignored their shouts. Instead, he took out a heavy jade much bigger than the ordinary communication jade and injected a bit of warrior chi into it. This is the communication jade that was newly developed by the Wu-Daist Alliance. By now, only a few seniors of the Wu-Daist Alliance have the right to use it. After the injection of warrior chi, he controlled the communication jade and created a virtual picture in the air above the jade. Different from your communication jade, this one can transmit pictures and videos besides messages. Transmit what? They looked baffled, not knowing that there existed such a weird communication jade. This is a video that they just sent to me. You can watch it. In the video before them, young men and women had their limbs tied, and lightning energy got injected into their bodies by spiritual artifacts under the threats of the cultivators of BTIC faction. The shrill screams chilled the hearts of everyone present. What? What is this? They all looked horrified. About 1 day later, the cultivators of Xianzhong Manor and Yuexu Mountain, the two biggest forces in the cultivation world on the continent, gathered together. What happened to the BTIC faction? An old daist wearing a purple robe asked in a trembling voice. It was severely damaged. Most of the high-level cultivators were killed, and their faction guarding Grand Array was shattered. Even the spiritual essence in the spiritual vein underground was almost emptied. Even if they can recover from this disaster, they will be reduced to a third-tier faction. In short, it is ruined. Li Longyuan answered. They went too far. A grey-robed old daist yelled, no one had ever beaten our 3 Saint Gate so hard for many years. I'll go and avenge the BTIC faction. Elder Yan. The daist sitting at the head of the table wore a white robe and a jade belt. With a whisk in his hand, he looked very dignified. He opened his mouth and said, I know that you are close to the elders in the BTIC faction, but this time, Your Holiness worked behind us and incited the big factions to suppress the UG. He glanced at a disciple beside him, and the latter whispered, the Origins Internet Club. Ah, the Origins Internet Club, he continued, we must consider this issue carefully. Consider what? A red-robed elder yelled in a fury, we still need to consider after someone raised the BTIC faction to the ground? Should we wait until our own factions are destroyed? I don't agree. Right. I don't agree as well. Faction Master, I don't agree either. We all don't agree. We must avenge the BTIC faction. The elders were indignant since no one had ever dared to show any disrespect to these 3 factions for the last thousands of years. But today, one of the factions was almost razed to the ground. It was outrageous. The 2 faction masters looked at each other with bitter smiles on their faces. You can't enter. At this moment, a terrified voice came from the door. You. Report. Several disciples guarding the door came in with reluctance and reported, the masters of the different factions are here. We can't stop them anymore. With a large group of elders and elite disciples behind them, the masters of Jade Hill Mountain, Ling Lang Mountain, Dragon Sea Daist Palace, and the other big factions came into the room with fierce expressions on their faces. Guys, what do you want? The elders of Xianzhong Manor and Yuexu Mountain stared at the intruders with cold eyes. In a bright green robe, Jade Hill Mountain Master looked extremely gloomy with veins bulging on his forehead. I seem to have heard someone say that they want to avenge the BTIC faction. Do you have any objections? The red-robed elder looked at this group of people in disdain. In his mind, these people were useless and fought for small interests. Even if they gathered, they were nothing in his eyes. However, this group of people was unified today, it was an unusual sight. Jade Hill Mountain Master waved his arm and yelled, how dare you? Beat him for me. Attack. My Ling Lang Mountain will throw caution out of the window. We trusted you 3 Saint Gates so much, but you did such shameful things and treated us this way. Beat him. Beat anyone who dares to avenge the Taxa faction. Today, the useless factions in their eyes shared a mind, which dumbfounded even the masters of the 2 saint factions. What's happening? You mean, we can learn it too? Of course. This shop has all kinds of ultimate techniques. The technique that the shop owner used is one of them. The Zika spiritual master drank up the soup of the instant noodles. I must go now, Yunar is calling me to play the king of fighters. It doesn't feel right, having eaten instant noodles for several days now, Shui Xianyun said in bafflement. How come both the spiritual essence and the demonic essence in my body are being purified right now? It just removed the impurities from the demonic essence but doesn't get rid of it. What should I do? Cackle. At this moment, a black cloud floated by with gloomy laughter. This shop can't solve your problem, but I can. Now that you've gotten a part of demon physique, only I can help you. Go away. Shui Xianyun had the urge to throw the bowl of instant noodles onto its head. Although she didn't do that, she did punch it with her fists. Stupid demon, do you think you can block the shop owner's divine light? Even at your prime, what percentage of Yuquan demon's strength do you have? Osh! You dare to go against me? I'll gather my spiritual essence and punish you for good. It took a deep breath and sucked in spiritual essence in anger. On the other side, Mr. Fang glanced at the energy bar under the teleportation array. Ugh! It increased again. Meanwhile, in Mr. Fang's Xone A section in Mr. Fang's living room was turned into a compartment to accommodate about 10 arcade machines. It is okay if you can't afford to buy the game. Come to my place, and you can buy 1 token with 15 gold coins. Insert the token, and you can start playing the game. Mo Xian walked in with Shui Xianyun and found many players in the compartment. A white-haired old man, Nalan Hung Guyu, was sitting on a bench with a purple-clothed young man, Song Qingfeng, moving the joysticks wildly. Clap! 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 With sweat popping out on his forehead, Nalan Hung Guyu slammed his big hand on the gamepad. Song Qingfeng controlled Iora Yagamai and shouted, Kyuzukaze, strong punch, and Shiki Aoi Hana. Aya! Light jump! Low kick! Are you stunned? Smugly, Song Qingfeng used Iora Yagamai's desperation move. Clap! 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 Nalan Hung Guyu shook the joystick wildly as if he could get out of the difficult situation by shaking the joystick and smashing the buttons. Right now, Shui Xianyun was watching them play from behind, and Mo Xian whispered while her face twitched, "Let's go and watch others play, this senior is a newbie." Nalan Hung Guyu's face turned dark, and he was at a loss for words. Soon, they walked over and stood behind Lu Ningyun and Zika spiritual master's seats. They heard Lu Ningyun introduce the game, "You must come here to play the King of Fighters and learn the most proper combos. Master, I'll show you how to play it." Then, she stared at the screen with a serious expression. "Look at my fat opponent, his name is Chong Koi Han. Watch how I use a combo on him." "Okay." Zika spiritual master watched earnestly. "This fat guy's moves are very lethal, so we must dodge first and find a chance to fight back." While Lu Ningyun explained, Chong Koi Han on the screen smashed a chain hammer at her character. "See? I've found his attack rhythm," Lu Ningyun said while controlling Kyokusanagi, "then, I will dodge and," before she could finish her words, the big fat guy on the screen caught Kyokusanagi who tried to dodge and smashed him onto the ground right away with vicious force. "I was careless. It was an accident. Let me start again." Thud. 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 "Ms. Lu, you are great at playing Chong Koi Han." Lin Xiao and the others came over and glanced at the screen while saying blithely, you took out Kyo Kusanagi without losing any HP. Lu Ningyun instantly blushed. Zika Spiritual Master, Shui Zianyun, maybe. I'll go and find the shop owner, the Zika Spiritual Master said hesitantly. I heard that his skills in the King of Fighters are awesome. Lu Ningyun gritted her teeth and couldn't say much. Meanwhile, at the tea table in the lounge of the half-city shop I heard that Dajin had won another war. A mystical-looking young man with white hair and white clothes was eating spicy sticks while sitting on the couch. Yet, they won the war by a landslide. Black Demon nodded repeatedly. Despite the fact that he had gained a tremendous growth in his cultivation strength, he didn't dare to show any disrespect to this young man. The young man looked about 18 years old, but he had been at the top position among the forces in the inner city while the Reincarnation King's Reincarnation Palace was still a small force in the outer city. Black Demon explained, they even used, some sort of communication warfare, and one of the methods they used came from our half-city. They used it on their new communication jade which could release special waves and tricked the combined army of dozens of forces. Who could have imagined this method of warfare if we didn't hear it from them? By the way, they even allow us to purchase the findings of some of their research projects. Purchase what? The mystical-looking young man waved his hand and said, if they can do it, we can do our own research as well. You just show me how to play it. They say that there is better stuff in there, right? Ugh, Black Demon froze for a moment and then said, no problem. Then, he beckoned at a couple of Black Demon guards and said, summon some guys, and we'll go and rob the Pacific Bank. Get a few more kurumas. Rob? Bank? Kuruma. The young man looked at Black Demon in bafflement while eating spicy sticks. Yet, this is the fastest way to make money. Black Demon said in high spirits, when we have enough money, we can afford to research lots of stuff. I heard that the Wu Videist Alliance had begun producing crystal cars. I got it now. I'll bring more people to rob this bank thing. Let's go and drive cars. Obviously, after watching Mr. Fang's livestream, many players began playing the King of Fighters, and the sales of this small game had reached 900 and was still growing. The compartment for the King of Fighters in Mr. Fang's Xone was full of players shaking the joysticks and coming and going. Meanwhile, curious about Dajin's miraculous victory against the invasion, many forces began to study their tactics. As news spread, the sales of Grand Theft Auto 5 shot up again. At this moment, Mr. Fang looked at the wheel on the system interface and saw 3 items, 3 movies, and 4 games on it. Final Fantasy VII Advent Children? A Chinese Ghost Story? Devil May Cry 3? Animusha 3? Resident Evil 3, Godly Weapon Fragment, Celestial Bean, Random Bloodline Elixir. While looking at the games, movies, and items, Mr. Fang began to turn the wheel. Bloodline Elixir. Mr. Fang was tempted. This is good. If I take it, no one will dare to criticize my poor talent anymore. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Mr. Fang stared at the wheel when it stopped. Devil May Cry 3. Meanwhile, a prompt appeared on Mr. Fang's system interface. The number of players for a single small game reaches 1000, and you have achieved the accomplishment bringing in a fortune each day. You got an achievement gift bag. Do you want to open it? Open. You've obtained red bean milk tea. Only sold in winter, Mr. Fang. After Your Holiness created this scandal by trying to suppress a force, they couldn't possibly butcher all the cultivators on the continent just to shut them up. After all, as the faction masters of Saint factions, it was wise to protect their own factions even though their deist friends were killed. Guys, to protect his personal interest and due to his distorted mind, Your Holiness made a huge mistake. Now that he is dead, and his accomplices were killed, I hope you guys can put this whole thing behind you, the purple-robed, old deist said. Due to our limited cultivation strength and lack of time, we weren't able to discover his wrongdoings in time and thus can no longer call ourselves Saint factions. From now on, we'll cultivate in seclusion and. At this moment, their top priority was to appease these angry people. Otherwise, the elders who had clamored to avenge the Taxa faction would be beaten to death by these furious cultivators. What kind of damn situation is this? The two faction masters looked at each other, both appeared to be having headaches. Avenge? They would be thankful if they could get out of the current situation unscathed. Red bean milk tea, 6 crystals/cup. Mr. Fang glanced at the introduction on the system interface which said that the red bean in the milk tea was a top-quality spiritual crop from a plant named fire thorns, and it had a natural rich fragrance. The milk tea powder was ground from a black tea which had been cultivated after experimenting for generations and produced with many exquisite processes. It even had a detailed explanation of the milk powder and the meticulously selective dairy product. As for the water for making this milk tea, it was the volcanic cold rock spring water specially provided by the system, and this water had been used in making Sprite, Coke, and instant noodles. While reading the introduction that comprised over 10 lines of words, Mr. Fang wondered, it's just milk tea. How can you make it sound so awesome? Half City was gloomy and chilly, and its snow came earlier than Zhuhua City in the winter. When Fang Qi opened the shop in the early morning, the snow outside the door was already thick. When one stepped into it, the snow could cover up to their ankles. The warriors and cultivators could resist the severe chill by circulating the qi or essence in their bodies. Some high-level spiritual garments contained arrays which could adjust temperatures. For cultivators, the winter didn't bring them many inconveniences, no matter how cold it was. Zoemo was shoveling snow in the street in front of the shop with Saint Spirit sword techniques. Despite the heavy snowfall, the business in the shop was as good as usual. While many of the customers were cultivators, the number of warriors in the shop began to grow, even though there were few of them in the Morning Star Sea realm. Black Demon, Yuan Hung Pavilion, and the other forces had begun to recruit warriors. Since Nalan Hung Guyu almost killed Divine Palace Realm cultivators with Sword 23 at Taxa faction, the status of warriors had grown in these people's minds. The cultivators in Half City used to look down upon this group of people, but now they began to put emphasis on them. At least for now, they realized the potentials of warriors. The players living in Half City such as Ruan Ning, Xiu, and even Ning Bai from the inner city came very early to the shop in the morning. Now that some experienced players had mastered the sword control technique, all kinds of sword energies landed in front of the shop one after another. Ugh! They blinked and looked up at the stairs leading to the second floor, nonplussed. Sir, how come your quilts fell down the stairs? Ah! I'm so cold. At this moment, a howl came all the way from the second floor to the first floor. A big pile of quilts was shivering at the foot of the stairs. When are we going to Zhuhua City? Achoo! A pair of red eyes peeked out from the quilt and gazed at Mr. Fang in hope. Mr. Fang's face turned dark. What are you doing bundling yourself in Little Mo's quilt? Can't you resist the chill with your spiritual essence? Achoo! It inhaled a mouthful of spiritual essence. Then, Mr. Fang saw that the energy bar under the teleportation array grow again. He kicked it back to upstairs and said, "You demons never die, right? Just take the cold as a way to strengthen your body." After this interlude, someone soon saw the new information written on the small blackboard. "Sir, what is red bean milk tea? A new beverage." Mr. Fang took out 1 cup and poured it for himself. Soon, a rich fragrance of milk mingled with faint tea scent permeated the air. "It smells so good." Ning Bai's eyes brightened while she lightly licked her lips. "Sir, your food is always appetizing. If it continues, I'll run out of money simply from buying the food in the shop. Can't you sell it for less? Will you run out of money because of food? What can poor people do then?" Mr. Fang saw through her and pointed it out mercilessly. "Humph! You're not fun." She rolled her eyes at Mr. Fang. "I'll take a cup. One for me too." When they sipped the milk tea, the warm and silky fragrance of milk flowed from their mouths to their bellies and hearts. So delicious! Pleased, Xiu sipped her milk tea again and sat down on the couch. It's warm and cozy. Compared with Coke, this taste is more lingering. Really? Is it really so warm? A pile of quilts came down shivering and looked at the people drinking milk tea with longing eyes. Mr. Fang glanced at it. Do you have money for it? If no, get out of here. Who said that I don't have money? Achoo! Then, 1, 2, 3, 6 crystals were piled neatly on the counter. You still have crystals on you? How come I don't know that? Mr. Fang dragged over the quilt and shook it as if he were shaking a piggy bank, but no crystals came out. No more. No more. You can't take any crystals from me. With a series of screams, it was tossed aside by Mr. Fang, and it scrambled to pour itself a cup of milk tea. Soon, a figure bundled in quilt sat on the couch. Wow! It's indeed warm. Ha 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 ha! I'm very satisfied with this, milk tea. All the customers who were sipping milk tea were at a loss for words at the sight. Sir, what is Devil May Cry 3? After all, it was quite rare for the shop to have 2 new items in one day. Obviously, she was interested in this genre. Since the game's name was Devil May Cry, Mr. Fang said, you guys can just take it as a story about a half-devil. Ugh! Half-devil! Hearing the words upon entering the shop, Mo Xian involuntarily pulled her junior sisters further away from Ningbai. She whispered to Yuan Yan and the others, it's surely not something good. Will we fall into Devil Dao by playing this game? We'll be in danger if we get Qi deviation and fall into the Devil Dao in the game. It seems like the shop owner is planning to play it himself now. They watched Mr. Fang walk to computer number 1 with a cup of milk tea in his hand. Meanwhile, the warriors and cultivators in Zhuhua City shop had also noticed the new items of the shop. Sitting happily at the counter, Zhang Xiaoyu poured herself a cup of milk tea before opening QQ. She was very pleased that Mr. Fang allowed her to move a computer onto the counter. Boss, many customers are asking about the game Devil May Cry. Mr. Fang saw a Loli's avatar jump on QQ and immediately clicked it open. Tell them that I'll put the new game on the live stream. Okay. Fang Qi glanced around the shop and saw that people were either playing The Legend of Mir 2, watching TV series, or driving in Grand Theft Auto 5. Some were even playing The Legend of the Sword and Fairy and Diablo 2. It was quite lively in the shop. The shop owner is going to live stream the new game. It was still early, and some idling people were still lounging on the couches, eating instant noodles or sipping the newly released milk tea. Hearing that Mr. Fang would put the new game on the live stream, they immediately perked up. Another game with a weird name. Sitting on the couch, Lan Yan looked at the big screen while eating instant noodles. Ms. Nalan, what do you think this game is about? Nalan Mingxiu said, I hope it's about warriors. After all, the previous released Grand Theft Auto 5 mainly featured potential spiritual artifacts, and Shu Mountain was undoubtedly about cultivators and their cultivation system. Warriors couldn't relate, and it did little for them. In other words, in the whole shop, only the King of Fighters and Wind and Cloud mainly featured warriors, but there was no virtual reality game focusing on warriors yet. As a self-disciplined girl, Nalan Mingxiu was eager to increase her strength. You're right. It would be great if we have a game like The Legend of the Sword and Fairy but with a focus on warriors, Lan Yan said, but I guess it's not plausible. After all, it's usually cultivators who fight devils and demons, right? While they talked, the big screens were turned on. Before them was a European-style building. The bright full moon rose high in the sky, giving the sky a weird blue color. You've heard of it, haven't you? The Legend of Sparta. It sounded like the beginning of a story while the smooth and reminiscent female voice brought the audience into that magical and amazing world. When I was young, my father would tell me stories about it. Long ago, in ancient times, a demon rebelled against his own kind for the sake of the human race. With his sword, he shut the portal to the demonic realm and sealed the evil entity off from our human world. But since he was a demon himself, his power was also trapped on the other side. Forgetting to swallow the instant noodles in her mouth, Lan Yan watched the fighting scenes on the big screen with widened eyes. After all, she was a girl who had never seen a real devil before, and she had never heard such stories before. No. Is this a story about a devil? Lu Ningyun and Mo Xian were dumbfounded. Words like devil and saving humans were enough to completely flip their worldviews upside down. Subconsciously, they glanced at the devil who was warming itself with a cup of milk tea while bundling itself in a big quilt. No way! How can this thing save humans? Baffled, they turned their gazes back to the big screen. Ahem! Why are you look at me? I don't know anyone named Sparta. On the big screen, the calm but somewhat sentimental voice continued telling the story. I never believed it. I thought it was just a child's fairy tale. I discovered that the so-called legend wasn't a myth at all. Sparta existed. How do I know? Well, I met the sons of Sparta, both of them. On the big screen, two figures became clear. One was a young man who looked handsome, valiant, and somewhat demonic. He wore a dark red coat and had a double-handed sword in his hands. The other looked 90% similar to the first young man, and he wore a blue windbreaker. They swung the sword and saber so fast that their movements were a blur to the audience. Only the turbulent winds created by the movements of the weapons left grey arcs in the rain, showing that their swords had moved at an extremely fast speed. Although they were both fighting at close range with weapons, their combat styles were very different from those used by the warriors in this world. Without sword energies or even warrior chi attached to the swords, the winds created by the fast movements of the sword and the saber showed the audience that each move contained explosive strength. The warriors in the audience were fascinated. Though the same blood of their father flows through their veins, the two battled each other fiercely like arch-enemies. It seems as if they derive some twisted pleasure from this brotherly fighting. But in the end, only one was left standing. Like a lightning bolt, one of them pierced his sharp saber into the other's chest. He died. The audience gazed at the big screens without blinking, enthralled by the fierce and bloody fight. If these two little guys are like me, they can't die. But it seems that they are imposters, they don't even have 1% of my power. With that said, a devil sipped his milk tea smugly. Then, the scene turned to some time much later, and a white-haired young man walked out of a room in one piece. He's indeed unkillable. It almost spat out the milk tea in its mouth. Dante, the son of Sparta, was obviously the main character of the game. The audience watched as Dante was raided by devils and demons in his own shop, and he was pierced by sabers, sickles, and other weapons. Then, he pulled out these weapons from his body before fighting his adversaries. F***ck. How come this guy is so awesome? He's intact after being pierced like that. It was a powerful demonic sword, and its thick body was excellent for close-range combat. However, when necessary, it could follow Dante's mind and fly out to attack enemies. Meanwhile, he had a pair of guns, ebony and ivory, which acted as long-range weapons. This guy can use guns. When Song Qing Feng and the others saw Dante accurately hit one of more than a dozen billiard balls that were sent to the air, and that the billiard ball hit another before it continued like a chain reaction until all the billiard balls were hit and struck the lesser demons who surrounded him. His marksmanship is unrivaled. This guy is so dashing. How can one shoot so well? What technique is this? Even Nalan Hungguo gazed at the big screen intently. He has the devil bloodline in his body. Ning Bai looked very interested. I'm surprised that he is the main character. After all, most of the cultivators in Half City were more scared of her than awed by her, some even repelled her unconsciously. However, now, she actually saw. I'm surprised he is the main character. Soon, it was time for Mr. Fang to control the character. The players watched as Mr. Fang swung the double-handed sword with whistling sounds. Mr. Fang dodged an attack and appeared before a lesser demon in the blink of an eye, piercing the skeleton demon wrapped in a black robe and holding it up high with his sword. Then, he controlled Dante to jump high. Fang Qi remembered that when he first played the game, he could hit the monsters repeatedly in mid-air in a combo. However, in the virtual reality version created by the system, Dante paused in mid-air while he launched several attacks at lightning speed before smashing his heavy sword down into the monster's face. Crack! With a huge noise, the sword hacked the hard skull of the skeleton demon into two halves before cutting deep into the hard ground as if it were a piece of tofu. Meanwhile, a devil on the side hacked a sickle toward Mr. Fang. Be careful! This monster launched a sneak attack. So sneaky! While people exclaimed in alarm, Dante spun the two handguns, ebony and ivory, in his hands, and the audience saw some energy gathering at the end of the gun barrel. Not ordinary guns, they were guns that could kill demons. At this moment, the sickle was almost about to cut into him with vicious force. Boom! Mr. Fang pulled the trigger, and a bullet shot out like a cannonball with red light, sending the demon flying backward with its sickle. This is... The audience looked at each other. The guns can be used like this. Obviously, Dante had attached some demonic energy to the bullet, which was why this shot was so powerful. The audience saw a new possibility that they had never imagined before. Of course, it was not that they hadn't thought of it, but that the ordinary guns couldn't achieve this effect. However, these were the guns for people with real cultivation strength. Then, the double-handed sword that was as tall as one man hacked down viciously. Boom! It cut both the demon and the wall behind it into two halves. The sword didn't show any spiritual light, but Dante put all his strength into swinging the sword. However, this horrifyingly powerful sword swing showed the viewers the ultimate fierceness of close-range combat. The combat method of using the big sword and guns alternatively was unheard of before. At close range, he struck with his sword; from a distance, he used the guns. The movements were as smooth as flowing water. It fascinated not only fans of guns but the warriors who used cold weapons. They were all eager to try this battle method. This kind of combat is so enjoyable to watch. Even the cultivators including in Hue voiced their appreciation. The Hell Vanguard managed the dead in Hell. They were the grim reapers that even the residents of Hell feared. Soon, Mr. Fang controlled Dante and killed his way out, and he encountered this demon. What's this thing? It can teleport. It shouldn't be teleportation. It moved very fast and disguised itself for one instant, which made it look like it teleported. The audience watched intently while this black-cloaked god of death hovered in the mid-air with a huge sickle in its hand. It kept disappearing and then appearing while its sickles struck from various impossible angles. Each strike was lethal, and the viewers watched with their hearts in their throats. How come this monster at the beginning of the game is so strong? Is it a boss? Intently, Mr. Fang controlled Dante to dodge the huge sickle that was coming from all directions. His dodges and counter-strikes made the audience's eye go blue and their heads become dizzy. With even a small mistake, a huge wound would appear on Dante's body. The sword moved like shadows on the big screen while Dante moved in the ruins like a ghost, dodging and counter-striking. Awesome! People like Song Ching Feng yelled in astonishment. This guy is F***ing good. In the half-city shop, people like Black Demon were also excited. What's going on? Ning Bai was baffled, wondering why these demons always fought at such close range. From my understanding, we demons always use spiritual spells. Although our physiques are tough, how come they are fighting this way? However, while watching this enthralling combat, she tilted her head and bit her lower lip with her sharp teeth, looking hesitant. Should I use my strength this way as well? It doesn't feel right though. Humph. He's blessed with great strength but resorts to this low-level combat method like warriors. On the side, the big demon said while sipping its milk tea, Gulp. He's indeed a weak junior left behind in the human world. He's lucky that he didn't meet me, or I would have sent him flying with one breath. Anyway, it was going to boast first. Wearing a blue windbreaker, Virgil stood on the tower. His chiseled face looked like a perfect demon statue under the setting sun, and the god of death lay on the ground behind him like an obedient pet. Yamato, the name of Virgil's katana, flashed, and he withdrew the saber without looking back. Like a piece of garbage, the upper half of the god of death slid off its body and fell to the ground. This guy seems more powerful. His saber technique is awesome. So dashing, people like Song Qingfeng yelled, "I want to play this game." Just imagine the scenario in which his saber flashes and the sneak attacker behind him being hacked into two halves as he withdraws the saber. It was super dashing. A large group of people were watching the live stream in the half-city shop. Do all the demons in this game engage in close-range combat? They don't look weak at all. Baffled, they continued watching. Ugh! Can we learn techniques from the game? Soon, they saw Mr. Fang open the level-up interface and glanced at Dante's techniques. Mr. Fang had played it before, but in the virtual reality version where everything looked more real, he had to refresh his memory and get more familiar with the techniques. At the beginning, Dante had 4 styles, each of which would change his techniques and moveset and affect the combat greatly. The styles were Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard. The Trickster style focused on agility and moving methods, which was similar to mastering footwork. It would enable Dante to dodge many attacks and get close to his opponents quickly. Also, he could dash in mid-air, scale buildings, and teleport a short distance. The beginning level was level 1, and the players could level up by accumulating experience points through killing monsters in battle. The Swordmaster style focused on the attacks of close-range weapons. This style would enable Dante to use powerful close-range techniques, and each melee weapon had its own style of attacks. The Gunslinger style focused on the attacks of long-range weapons. It would allow Dante's guns to launch very dashing techniques, such as Kalina An's homing missiles. The Royal Guard style focused on defense, which required the players to have a high control of timing. It couldn't be used to completely block the damage coming from enemies alone. But if it were used at the instant when the enemies touched Dante, it could block the attacks and knock back demons without strong demonic energy, as well as leveling up this style. Each successful complete defense would absorb the enemy's attack, and the accumulated damage could be released onto the enemies, inflicting huge damage. On the level up interface, people saw that 2 styles at the bottom were grayed out, which meant that they couldn't be activated at this stage. Quicksilver style, not activated. It will consume Dante's demonic energy and automatically stop when his demonic energy runs out. When it was used, all the people except Dante would move extremely slowly. At this moment, the enemy's attacks and movement speeds would be reduced to 1/10 of the normal speed, while Dante's speed won't change. Doppelganger style, not activated. This style can't be leveled up, but it will consume Dante's demonic energy and automatically stop when the demonic energy runs out. Can only be used when the demonic energy meter is more than 3 bars. When it is used, there will be 2 Dantes, one will be his shadow clone. The doppelganger will use Dante's current weapons but won't change weapons if the true form does. If the true form doesn't change weapons, his doppelganger will use the same moves as the true form. The doppelganger will be invincible and possess the same damage as Dante. F***ck. While the audience watched the combat, they were fascinated by this novel and powerful combat style. However, if they used this method on cultivators who were agile, far away, and knew the sword control technique, they would be at a disadvantage and forced into a passive situation similar to current warriors when they face cultivators in battle. Therefore, regardless of how powerful the strikes were, they were useless. However, when they saw the Quicksilver style, they were stupefied, and their minds went blank. Is this controlling time? The law of time? The big demon who was sipping milk tea yelled, "What's in this little guy's bloodline? He can even understand the law of time. It's something even I can't access. Only the true kings of my kind have the right to understand it. The cup of milk tea fell to the table. Fortunately, it was now empty, so nothing was spilled onto the ground. What did I see? It's faked. Must be faked. Impossible. It was unimaginable. Just think about it, if a warrior combined teleportation with the control of time, even demons would be no match for this warrior, let alone cultivators. Moreover, it would be more terrifying with a doppelganger, which meant that one could double their power. Besides, one of them was invincible. Now remembering Dante's horrifying hacking strike with explosive damage, people no longer thought that close-range combat was a disadvantage at all. The people in the audience looked at each other and saw fear and shock in their eyes. They couldn't wait to try it. Ning Bai said, "Sir, I want to play this game." The Zika spiritual master followed, 30 crystals for activation? I'm leaving the money here, going online now. Black Demon added, I'll try it too. People like Mo Xian and Yu Yan had said that they looked down at this main character, but they quickly glanced at their master before looking at each other. Shui Xianyun put down the crystals and said, Junior sister, wait. I'll try it too. Should we? Mo Xian murmured, shall we try it as well? Isn't this guy a descendant of a demon? Will we experience chi deviation and turn demonic by playing this game? Yu Yan asked. Did you see the shop owner experiencing chi deviation? Let's go. Hurry. We won't be able to learn that so-called law of time if we're slow. Don't you see that master and the others are playing it? Hey! Wait for me. When they arrived at the computer zone, the seats were all taken. Dazed, they asked, Sir, are there any available seats? Soon, not only warriors but quite a few cultivators had begun playing the game. In Zhuhua City, Song Qingfeng, the royal princess, the second prince, and other warriors had all grabbed seats anxiously to get online. What's the hurry? Xiao Lenjiu, Li Suiai, and other disciples from Shengjing Academy or Zi Academy, who had come late today and thus missed the live stream, were very curious. You don't understand. It's a new game. At this moment, two figures came to the door and looked inside before pushing open the door and cautiously walking in. Daoist brother Li, is this the place? The person who spoke was a snow-white female Daoist wearing white clothes and a jade belt. If Fang Qi were here, he would recognize that she was Ling Wanyan, the direct eldest disciple of the Yuexu faction since he had met her at the Taixi faction that day. The other was a purple-clothed young man carrying a treasure sword on his back. He was Li Longyuan from Xianzhong Manor. Humph! It doesn't look like a dangerous place like the Dragon's Lake and Tiger's Den. Li Longyuan said in a cold voice, it's just an ordinary shop. He pushed open the door and walked in. How come it's so huge inside? His eyeballs almost popped out. Although this shop was located on an ordinary street in Zhuhua City, it was full of cultivators and warriors including quite a few Divine Ocean Realm and Emperor Warrior Realm masters. The customers each held a cup with a picture of red beans and milk on it in their hands, and a big straw was stuck in each cup. A white-haired senior sipped from the straw in full force, looking extremely intoxicated. The two newcomers hadn't seen this expression on anyone else before. Ah! Elder Fu exclaimed after finishing his drink, my lord, this red bean milk tea is so good. Before they knew it, they walked to the counter and saw an exquisite loli. How can I help you? Ugh! Li Longyuan whispered, Master told us to gather information, we can't draw attention to us by acting haughty. Of course, after witnessing the Orochi Divine Light technique that day, even though they were the eldest direct disciples of 2 out of the 3 Saint Gates, they had to keep a low profile and keep their tails between their legs in this remote country of warriors. We'll take, red bean milk tea. Ling Wanyan pointed at a passerby who had just poured himself a cup of milk tea and said, just like that one. Right. Right. Li Longyuan agreed and nodded. 1 cup for each of us. 12 crystals for 2 cups. So expensive. Ling Wanyan mumbled. Not so expensive, Li Longyuan said, the spiritual jade marrows that we use in our factions are precious drinks that one can't even buy with crystals. The so-called milk tea can only fool these warriors of Dajin, he whispered. Then, he went over and poured 2 cups of milk tea. Not caring to try it, he said, let's go and see what these guys are doing in this shop. Hey! At this moment, a golden-robed young man walked over. Is this red bean milk tea in your hands? Yeah, what then? You two have good taste. The golden-robed young man waved his folding fan and said graciously, from your looks, this is your first time visiting in this shop, right? At first glance, you picked the shop's new item for the winter, the red bean milk tea, that many cultivators crave for. Good choice. Good taste. Oh. Li Longyuan asked curiously, can you explain what you mean? Isn't it just an ordinary beverage? How come cultivators crave for it? You may not know it, the golden-robed young man said expansively, but this red bean milk tea is made from red beans that aren't ordinary, and the milk tea is from precious spiritual tea and spiritual milk mixed in a certain proportion. It's rich but not greasy and has a lingering fragrance. They gaped at the golden-robed young man. It is really that good. Li Longyuan sipped it subconsciously. Wow! Instantly, his eyes widened. Deist brother Li. While holding her cup of milk tea, Ling Wanyan stared at Li Longyuan curiously. What? Is it really so good? Li Longyuan took a deep drink. Gulp. 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 Soon, they could only hear the sounds of sucking on air. Deist brother Li. Even more baffled, Ling Wanyan asked, how is it compared to the spiritual jade marrows in your faction? It's not something special for us, right? It's all gone already. Before she could finish her words, Li Longyuan opened the cap and poured the red beans and leftovers into his mouth. Verb. He belched. Ling Wanyan were dumbfounded by the extreme pleasure showing on his face. Hey! You gulped it down. It is a waste of this precious beverage. The golden-robed young man stomped his foot in frustration. How can you drink the milk tea this way? Then, how should we drink it? Ling Wanyan's interest was piqued, wondering how delicious this drink was that it had made Li Longyuan lose his composure. Xiao Yulv explained, you must put the straw deep to the bottom of the cup and sip the mixture of the red bean and the milk tea. The fragrances of the red beans and the milk tea combining and colliding in your mouth will create the best taste for you. I didn't know there is so much technique required in drinking milk tea. Ling Wanyan sipped the milk tea following his instructions. She almost screamed. 3 minutes later, they each held a small tray with spicy sticks, instant noodles, and Coke on it. While enjoying the snacks, they stood behind one computer to watch this person play the game. Deist brother Li, I'm surprised that the delicacies in this shop are so delicious. I wonder how good is the game that Gongzi Xiao mentioned. It's a pity that the house is full, and we can't experience them now. Don't worry. We can enjoy the snacks while we wait in line for our turn, Ling Wanyan mumbled with her mouth full while she sipped her milk tea and stuffed a spicy stick into her mouth. Wow! The spicy sticks are so delicious. Meanwhile, Ning Bai and the others who were lucky to grab seats had begun their journeys in Devil May Cry 3. The sword blade missed it by 1 inch, and it was intact. Meanwhile, the other small demons surrounded her. Seeing that a demon pounced at her with a sickle, Mo Xian copied the shop owner and spun the 2 guns in her hands very elegantly. But they flew out and hit the demon in the face. After the demon with the sickle was hit on the face by the guns, it roared and hacked the sickle toward Mo Xian's head at a greater speed. Ah! She hacked wildly with her sword. It was clear that the Zika spiritual master and the other cultivators were not doing any better. Although they could learn the basic sword techniques and shooting techniques that came with Dante while controlling him, the small demon's damage, speed, and intelligence were not as low as those in the original version of the game. Even the residents in Hell, the lowest level monsters, had cunning minds and high intelligence as well as battle abilities that ordinary people couldn't match. "Sir, how come this game is so difficult to play?" Ruanning yelled already. She had just died at the entrance of Dante's shop before meeting the boss. Mr. Fang said in contempt, "You are controlling the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta and got killed by some minions. You dare to tell me that the game is hard to play? You are just a noob." Ruanning's face turned dark. "Scummy shop owner. Should we follow Dante's instincts and use the sword techniques accordingly?" a lazy voice sounded. On Ning Bai's screen, she was battling with the Hell Vanguard. "Of course," Mr. Fang said, "if you don't know the sword techniques and want to control the character with your own ideas to show off, it's natural that you will get killed by small demons." Then, he casually rolled his eyes at Ruanning and said, "Look at how smart she is." Obviously, the warriors in the Zhuhua City shop didn't have the same problem. Even Song Qingfeng and the others who didn't have high cultivation strengths learned techniques and experiences from Dante's moves. They could easily deal with these small demons. Ugh! While sipping milk tea, Ling Wanyan was watching the game from behind. "Daoist brother Li, look at this guy. He's so powerful. Is he a warrior as well?" On the screen, Nalan Hungguo controlled his character with ease while he swung the big sword with whistling sounds. He was so fast that his movements were a blur to others. He watched all directions and heard all the sounds. When the Hell Vanguard silently appeared behind him, he turned abruptly while the sword vanished, leaving sword energies surging around. With the powerful demonic body and surging demonic energy, he could launch swift and heavy sword strikes at any moment. "Ha ha ha ha! My swordsmanship is awesome, eh?" he asked as if he had eyes on the back of his head. The moment he said it, the Hell Vanguard god blocked Dante's attack with its sickle, and the huge counterforce to this heavy hack sent Nalan Hungguo stumbling back. Before he could regain his balance, the sickle hacked down at his head. "Ah! Damn it!" his face was covered in blood. The two people who watched the game from behind froze. After hearing Xiao Yul's brief explanations, they had barely understood what games were. They said in horror, "Are these warriors fighting with these horrifying monsters each day?" Looking at the Hell Vanguard which floated around from left to right like a ghost on the screens, Ling Wanyan said, "Daoist brother Li, look. Many of them are playing this game. Should we try this game later?" In the Mr. Fang's group tour chat on QQ, a new topic was brought up today. "Black Demon, anyone playing Devil May Cry 3? Where are you now?" "Tang Yuan, I hate to say it, but this game is so hard to play. I haven't gotten out of the shop yet." Song Qingfeng, Akita Inu's cunning smile, "I'm fighting the Hell Vanguard." Nalan Mingxiu, "The Hell Vanguard is hard to fight." At this moment, Nalan Hungguo wiped the blood off his face and laughed, reporting in the group, "I've killed the Hell Vanguard. Anyone faster than me?" Meanwhile, Mr. Fang was about to arrive at the gate guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hell dog, without a word, but his movements and controls were a little strange. Mr. Fang swung his sword upward and knocked up a huge monster that was holding a sickle. This monster was obviously much stronger than the previous small demons. It had thicker skin and more HP, and it also moved faster and could teleport. After slashing it into the sky, Mr. Fang murmured, "Drop hack, shoot, drop hack again, it should be like this, right? How come I can't connect the moves?" Since all the virtual reality games followed the laws of the physics of the real world, the scenes in the original game where the monsters didn't move after their bodies were pierced by various weapons would not appear in the remake version. However, Mr. Fang was clearly undaunted. While controlling Dante, Mr. Fang swung the big sword so swiftly that it became a blurry shadow. He hacked downward once before doing it again, and it seemed like two lightning bolts crashed down. In the new version, I have to drop hack twice with power to subdue the demon with my force, and I can then knock it into the air. After his hypothesis was proven, he leaped up and hacked onto the demon in mid-air. Hack, and shoot. After 2 strikes, Mr. Fang quickly landed. Ugh! I can't do it. In the original game, Mr. Fang could use the double-handed sword so well that he could make flowers out of it. But when everything followed the laws of physics, the moves that he used in the original version were no longer effective in the new version. Wait, Mr. Fang thought about this problem while moving to the side to dodge another monster's blade strike. My pause in mid-air wasn't done right. Swift and powerful sword strikes can open the monsters' bodies without causing too much momentum, but they will still fall to the ground. Also, the monsters of hell have tough bones. There is no way that I can cut through their bodies without sending them flying. The only solution is to strike its joints that are only connected by demonic energy, Fang Qi thought. Meanwhile, Dante can stay in the air a bit longer with the recoil force of firing the guns. Different from the original version, I must fire vertically down on the ground to obtain the largest upward momentum and achieve the longest pause in mid-air for Dante. If the bullets are shot toward the ground, it would be best if they could bounce back and shoot the demons that I'm attacking to give them an upward momentum. I got it. Then, Mr. Fang controlled Dante to attack another demon. With perfect timing, he launched 2 swift and heavy strikes and then knocked the monster up with his sword. Then, Mr. Fang's character moved so fast that it looked like Dante was twitching in mid-air. He was striking with his sword and firing his guns so fast that only after images and vague shadows could be seen on the screen. At this moment, some nimble and clever players had killed the Hell Vanguard and passed the stage. In the chat group, Song Qingfeng posted a screenshot. I'm awesome! I killed the Hell Vanguard already. It's nothing. I did it long ago. Ning Bai also posted a screenshot. I did it too. I look up to you guys. Advanced players. Awesome. Smooth. At this moment, someone yelled in astonishment in the internet cafe, F***CK. How come the monster that the shop owner is fighting is not dropping to the ground? While controlling Dante, Mr. Fang seemed to be intoxicated in his own combat rhythm. With one foot stepping on a monster's body, he slid out as if he were on a skateboard and fired his guns repeatedly, forcing the nearby monsters to retreat. During the process, he dodged their attacks with perfect timing. In the end, he stomped on the elite monster under his foot, and it exploded into a cloud of demonic mist and shattered bones. Come on! Under Mr. Fang's control, Dante beckoned at the monster before him and taunted it mercilessly. Then, he slashed his sword abruptly. With a heavy sword strike, Mr. Fang knocked the last hell sloth out of the herd of demons and shot it onto the second floor. Under Mr. Fang's control, Dante repeatedly attacked the hell sloth that he had secluded from the herd of demons as if he were having a stroke. When the small demons followed him onto the second floor, Dante used the monster's body as his skateboard and crashed down to the first floor while firing his guns wildly. The series of plays were dizzying to watch. When Mr. Fang killed his way to the second boss Cerberus, the 3-headed hell dog that was guarding the demonic tower, he had gotten proficient with the moves which were derived from Dante's great strength and swordsmanship. After all, Fang Qi had his own deep understanding of the game, guns, and sword techniques. What's the shop owner doing now? In Mr. Fang's group tour in QQ, the players in the Zhuhua City shop were baffled. I suggest you watch the shop owner play the game. So powerful! How powerful! Nalan Hongyu was not pleased. Kid Fang passed the Hell Vanguard, and so did I. What's the difference? Yu Yan, no, I feel like the shop owner is playing a different game compared to us. Crying face Nalan Mingxiu, that's strong? Don't we all hack with the sword? Husky's baffled face. Su Tianji, what's this guy doing now? Sir, don't turn off the live stream. Please, sir. Continue the live stream for a bit longer. At this moment, Mr. Fang was leveling up his skills in front of the gate of the boss, and he noticed the boisterous group chat in QQOK. Soon, Mr. Fang turned on the live stream, and a huge ice mountain appeared before Dante on the screen. Ugh! How come they are all watching the big screen? At this moment, Ling Wanyan was busy eating instant noodles. Look! Li Longyuan pointed at the big screen. As if it had sensed the intrusion of an outsider, the ice mountain collapsed under violent shakes, and many huge ice blocks fell. A horrid demon with 3 heads walked out. It was as big as a mountain, and its whole body was covered in thick ice crystals. This Cerberus didn't only have great strength, it also excelled in ice elemental magic spells, possessed great intelligence, and could speak the human language. Obviously, it was way more powerful than the Hell Vanguard. It breathed out powerful chilly energy, which turned everything it touched into ice. The horrifying chilly energy that it emitted could even stop the circulation of spiritual essence in the ordinary cultivators' bodies. It was another powerful demon. Do these guys fight this kind of monsters each day in the fantasy world? Li Longyuan ate a spicy stick and said in a low voice, "Does the shop owner fight the monsters too?" While swallowing down a mouthful of instant noodles, Ling Wanyan said curiously, "The character and the moves are the same. I wonder if the shop owner can play the game differently." Then, they turned their attention to the game on the live stream. The Cerberus raised its heads, and intense, storm-like chilly energy rushed toward the tiny human before it. The chilly currents swept across the ground, and Fang Qi soon had no place to stand on. Humph! This 3-headed demon is smart for sealing the ground, knowing that this warrior can't fly. Li Longyuan said with a snicker, "This warrior looks strong but can't fly." After all, warriors are far weaker compared to cultivators. The moment he said it, Fang Qi Dante jumped up high into the air and used the sword and fired the guns alternatively with swift movements while hovering in the air above the Cerberus's heads. Ice debris flew from the heads of the Cerberus, and the ice crystal armor covering one of its heads was shattered by Mr. Fang's swift, heavy strikes in the blink of an eye. Soon, the other 2 heads slammed toward Fang Qi Dante, but he was already hovering in the air above another head of Cerberus with a red light flashing on his feet before striking and attacking repeated as if he were having a stroke. In the original version, Dante couldn't keep himself in the air for long by the recoil force of his guns. But now, Dante's sword strikes produced a counterforce which added to the recoil force of the guns. With these 2 forces added, it seemed like Mr. Fang wasn't going to land on the ground anytime soon. While striking and shooting, Mr. Fang explained, "Will I fall to the ground?" "No way. Look. It's still spitting ice on the ground stupidly, but I just won't fall to the ground." Cough, cough, cough. Ling Wanyan choked on a mouthful of milk tea, and her eyes instantly opened wide as if her eyeballs would pop out. Li Longyuan almost dropped the spicy stick that he had just picked up. The other 2 heads of the Cerberus launched attacks toward Mr. Fang crazily. However, the latter shot at the wall, and the recoil force helped him quickly fly away. Then, a dark red magic array flashed beneath his feet, enabling him to jump in the air as if he were stepping on land. He double-jumped in the air and turned to another direction, and sword strikes followed. Soon, the ice crystal armor on all 3 heads of Cerberus was shattered by Dante's wild attacks, which had also inflicted many wounds on the heads. Undaunted, the Cerberus took a deep breath and spat again. Mr. Fang had just landed on the ground, and he jumped up again and said, "What do we call this?" "I call it a moron who doesn't learn from his mistakes." A series of wild strikes followed. After several rounds, the Cerberus finally gave up its strategy of sealing the ground. With a roar, all 3 heads rapidly pounced at Mr. Fang. Finally landing on the ground, Mr. Fang suddenly made a defensive move. Then, a white light flashed abruptly. Royal Guard style release. This was a special defense technique which could absorb the enemy's energy using perfect defense and return it to the attacker. Although Fang Qi Royal Guard style didn't have a high level, it was enough. Everything happened in a flash. After the white flash disappeared, distinct horrid wounds appeared on all three heads of Cerberus. Before the audience could understand the situation, Cerberus fell to the ground with a sad howl. **CK. What happened? Is this the end of the battle? Battle. Chapter 390 Can't do it even after the lesson. The most shocking to them was that Fang Qi Dante was intact and not injured at all under the attacks of this powerful demon. Moreover, how come their Dante didn't have these moves? Just like what Yu Yan had said, I feel like the shop owner is playing a different game. You're not a human, right? Cerberus looked astonished. Each of Dante's weapons had an extraordinary background. For example, his first sword rebellion was left to him by his father, the legendary Dark Knight. Before Dante was another weapon. The demons or demon beasts only submitted to great power. After Cerberus was defeated, its huge mountain-like body shrank slowly until a heavy tripartite nunchaku hovered in the air while emitting vague blue light. The rods were like four-edged icy crystals. The moment that Fang Qi touched the weapon, he felt the powerful ice energy inside. An ordinary person would have been frozen into an ice statue upon touching it. On the screen, Dante whistled and swung this weapon swiftly, making the others feel dizzy. Daoist brother Li, Ling Wanyan whispered with the bowl of instant noodle in her hands, this guy seems very powerful. Li Longjiyuan's face twitched. How come warriors can be so powerful? It's said that a warrior had broken the four-symbol grand array, and he was only at the early stage of the Emperor Warrior realm. Li Longyuan was at a loss for words. All of a sudden, he felt like this shop presented a brand new world to him. He was very unfamiliar. How can warriors be so powerful? Soon, the game interface gave the ranking for the entire gameplay for this level, S. This game had a stylish ranking system, and the players would receive a ranking after clearing each stage. The ranking would affect the rewards that each player reaped at the end of each stage. In fact, it was a mechanism similar to the synchronization rate. From the interlude animation, people could see that Dante had a showy personality. He liked to show off his skills, and each of his moves and battles was dizzyingly dashing but very effective and to the point. The better that players could use this kind of combat style, the higher synchronization rate with Dante they would obtain, thus getting more rewards such as more cultivation strength and experience points. Under Mr. Fang's S ranking, people saw that the number of red orbs and stylish points was several times higher than what they got after killing the Hell Vanguard. However, when Mr. Fang killed the Hell Vanguard, he got an A and ranking, which was only a little higher than their rankings. Compared with Nalan Honggu's ranking of A, Fang Qi received only a few more red orbs and stylish points. How come the gap is so big? They were dumbfounded. If they copied Mr. Fang's combat style and obtained such a high ranking, they would achieve a tremendous increase in their cultivation strengths. Even the grandmasters such as Nalan Honggu would obtain an obvious increase in their cultivation strengths. Besides, the virtual reality version was made according to the real world, which made them wonder if these moves could be used in battles in the real world. Their breaths began to slightly quicken. Sir! How did you do those moves? How could you stay in mid-air for so long? How did you use the last move? How come we don't have it? After all, they all played the same character, and their levels were not too different. Ning Bai gazed at Mr. Fang's screen and quietly asked, "Can you teach Big Sister?" Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. They also wondered about the move which protected him from his enemy's sudden powerful attack and inflicted great damage to the latter. This combat technique was so powerful. If they could master it and use it in the real world, the warriors would get stronger under the attacks of their enemies, not vice versa. In this situation, the cultivators who couldn't find a good solution to this technique wouldn't dare to cast their spiritual spells. Otherwise, they would be killed by their own attacks. Kid Fang! Can you explain it to us? Nalan Honggu yelled and sent a bullet comment onto the big screen. It's simple, Mr. Fang explained to the audience while the live stream was still on. In virtual reality, Dante's downward sword strike combined his own strength, the sword's weight, and the demonic energy to increase the gravitational pull, which was why the force in the downward strike was much more powerful than the ordinary ones. It explained why the damage of this strike was extraordinarily powerful, and why Mr. Fang killed the boss so quickly while everyone was watching, but they were stuck and had to take half a day to kill the Hell Vanguard in the first stage. Mr. Fang continued to explain, all of you know how to leap into the air and hack down, right? It is Dante's downward strike. Then, he demonstrated the downward strike by putting all the weight on the sword and empowering it with his demonic energy to achieve great momentum. He quickly left a deep cut on the ground in the demonic tower. Then, Mr. Fang continued to explain, first, we need to use the complete downward strike onto the monster and then change the property of the demonic energy in the body to leap up. I believe you can all do that, right? With that said, he controlled Dante to demonstrate. While leaping into the air, he used only the recoil force of the two guns to keep him in the air for a long while before falling. This was the knowledge contained in Dante's character, and all the warriors could have learned it long ago. However, while Mr. Fang explained it, most of the people subconsciously had a bad feeling. He told them that it was easy, but it didn't sound so easy to them. When we knock the monster up into the air with the sword, we must precisely cut the sword into the monster's joints, which will give the minimum momentum to the monster's body. If we apply this technique to humans or animals, we call it painless autopsy. Ning Bai and the others looked at each other. After all, most of them couldn't even hit the monsters yet with their swords, and he wanted them to cut into the monster's joints without error. While Dante is in mid-air, it is the best time to strike with the sword. I believe you all have witnessed his strike. However, we can't land on the ground while striking, Mr. Fang continued. Instead, in the instant when the sword cut through the monster's body, we need to withdraw the demonic energy that we used earlier to increase the weight and dropping speed before turning it into the light body energy, which will enable us to hover in the air with the assistance of the recoil force of firing the guns. Then, you shoot downward. Then, they watched as Mr. Fang found a monster to demonstrate the strike, shot, strike, shot. On the big screen, the character had struck his sword over 10 times in one instant as if he were having a stroke. All the people were speechless, and they felt hopeless and desperate. It must be noted that striking with the sword would happen in a flash, and so would firing the guns in mid-air. In this moment, they also had to convert demonic energy in their bodies. They must repeat these moves again and again while their bodies rose and fell repeatedly. More importantly, they had to strike with their swords with maximum force. How can a human do all these? Damn it! Are you a demon? Wait. This Dante seems to be a demon. Then, what about the white light at the end? Many people intently stared at Mr. Fang on the big screens, putting all their hopes on the next technique. In theory, it could be achieved. Of course, it was only in theory. After all, many people couldn't even do it in the game, let alone in the real world. Anyway, no one could master a technique in one try. What white light? At this moment, the people put their hopes on the last horrid move with which Mr. Fang's Dante ignored his enemy's powerful attack and unleashed explosive damage. The move that killed the boss. Many players watching from behind Mr. Fang yelled in frustration. Tell us now. How come we couldn't find this move? They played the same character, so how come Mr. Fang had so many dizzying techniques but they didn't? These techniques were very powerful. You mean release? Mr. Fang opened Dante's skill interface and pointed at the column of battle styles, saying, this is even simpler. The Royal Guard style was indeed a simple battle style since it was easy to use in battle. The players just had to block the enemy's attacks the moment before they deal damage, perfectly fending off the enemies. This was Dante's special battle technique, which could store the enemy's energy into his body when perfectly blocking the enemy's attacks. Mr. Fang explained, use this technique of Dante, you can release the charged energy with your own strength at the same time. Just like this. A demon pounced at Mr. Fang at this moment. With a white flash of light, it was instantly killed, leaving red orbs all over the ground. So easy! Everyone looked at the big screens, feeling like it was a bit too simple to believe. I feel like, it's different from the move that you used on Cerberus, Lu Ningyun said with a frown. Right. Mo Xian stared at Mr. Fang and said suspiciously, Sir, did you keep something from us? When you attacked Cerberus, you moved extremely fast, and your body left after images. But you didn't do it just now. You mean that one? Fang Qi decided to explain it in detail so that he wouldn't be bothered with this question every day by these people. It's because there are 3 forms of release. The first one was the direct release. It was an attack that only players who didn't master the essence of this technique, and it had low damage. The second level was the royal release right before the enemy's attack. By launching this technique, the players could inflict great damage to the enemies while interrupting their attacks. Only players who mastered a portion of the skills could use it. The last one was called ultimate release, which was used at the very moment when the enemy's attack was almost upon the players. This technique not only contained the royal release's power but could block and absorb the enemy's offensive energy and convert it into life power for the players. In other words, the enemy's attacks would be neutralized, and the power of the player's release would increase. Only the ultimate release was fast enough to leave after images while being engulfed in white light. Since it had greater power, its attack was quicker and could cover a greater distance than the others. There are techniques this powerful. People felt as if a gate to a new world of close-range combat opened to them, and they looked at each other in shock. This technique sounded easy, but it was very risky to use, like licking the blood on a blade. If a small mistake was made with the timing and they allowed the enemy's attacks to hit them, the result was obvious. On the other hand, this highly risky technique could bring players great benefits if it were launched successfully. With this technique, it would even be hard for Cerberus, which had powerful life energy and a tough physical body, to survive one strike from Dante. The Royal Guard style was powerful and even horrid, and it was not difficult to use. All that players needed to do was block and then release. However, the ultimate release wasn't a technique that ordinary players could use. If it was successful, the players would be like a god in heaven. If it wasn't, the players would be like a human punching bag in hell. All the people fell silent. The good thing was that they could practice the ultimate release in the game. If they practiced it in the real world, it wouldn't be enough if they had thousands of lives. I advise you not to try the Royal Guard style until you have accumulated more battle experience and cleared stages several times. Mr. Fang wanted to give out tips with a good heart, but the people already swarmed to the computers and rushed toward the demons. Soon, the internet cafe was filled with screams of players who were being beaten and killed by demons. Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. To use the ultimate release, the players must be very proficient with the block technique of Royal Guard and had tremendous battle experience and terrifying battle awareness. Otherwise, the players could only use the normal release and be ordinary, or they had to risk their lives and try to use the ultimate release by luck. In fact, the ultimate release that Mr. Fang had used had an element of luck in it. After Cerberus was severely wounded by him, Dante only needed to use Royal Release to end the battle. Since he was intact and had full HP, he wasn't afraid even if the ultimate release failed. The worst scenario for him was trading some HP with Cerberus, and he would have killed the monster while losing some HP and not die. Without any burden on his mind, he caught the right moment and launched the ultimate release successfully. At this moment, the cultivators such as Mo Xian were still struggling with the basic combos, let alone the high-level techniques such as release. However, this didn't affect them much. After all, without the Royal Guard style, they could still show off in other ways. After all, leaving other things aside, Dante had many fancy, dashing, and effective moves to show off with. Sir, can you teach us something simpler? Completely lost, people like Lu Ningyun and Mo Xian came back with tears on their faces. Okay. Mr. Fang controlled Dante to deal with the last 2 elite demons. He chose one of them and repeatedly hacked at it. Then, his arm swung the sword and pierced out many sword shadows before he shot at the ground again and again in mid-air. Lastly, he stepped on the demon's body like he was standing on a skateboard and skidded around the place before crashing the other demon to the ground with the corpse of the demon below his feet. While he played, the audience behind him screamed one round after another. So powerful! We can play it like Wei. Their eyes were red with envy, they were eager to learn. Remembering their simple strikes. They never knew that battles could be this fancy. With cups of milk tea in hand, Yu Yan and the other disciples of the Nanhua faction quickly looked around, trying to find more than 10 seats for their senior brothers and sisters, junior brothers and sisters, masters, and even Ant Master to sit together. As the earliest customers from outside half-city who were brought here by Lu Ningyun, they usually followed the shop owner's footsteps and played the newest stuff in the shop. Soon, elders and disciples of the Nanhua faction sat in a row with bowls of instant noodles or cups of milk tea in their hands. The first thing that they did was opening the game of Devil May Cry 3. Master! I thought hard for a whole day yesterday and came up with a combo. While opening her game, Yu Yan said in excitement, I feel like it will be even more powerful than those used by the shop owner. Really? Are you serious? You came up with a combo. Mo Xian rolled her eyes at Yu Yan and said, our master doesn't use combos, she studied Royal Guard all day yesterday and will continue today. Oh, Yu Yan had turned to another direction. Ant Master Shui, do you want to see my new combo? Different from Origin's internet cafe, the peaceful life which had lasted thousands of years in Xianzhong Manor and Yuexu faction was disrupted. According to the ancient documents in the three saint factions, besides this huge continent, there were distant remote celestial islands on the sea outside the continent. There were cultivators and also all kinds of small mortal countries that would pop up frequently and quickly fall. Since there were many unknown dangers and risks in the vast ocean, those cultivators rarely had contact with the cultivators on this continent. Instead, those cultivators formed a system of their own, and they had also existed for many years. It was clear that some ancestral masters had braved the rough ocean, took the high risks, and passed through the sea territories controlled by many terrifying fierce beasts. In the end, they drifted to that sea realm which was primarily comprised of the sea with islands scattered on it. As a result, the three Saint Gates had recorded the customs and detailed information of that sea realm, and it was noted that it was a cultivation world as big as their own with Grand Masters of the Divine Palace realm. This was an area that the three Saint factions had known about. They also knew that this cultivation world wasn't weaker than them, but the gap in strength between these two worlds wasn't that big. About 1,000 years ago, they even got the information that the other cultivation world was almost destroyed by a demon catastrophe, and it was highly unlikely that they had recovered their previous strength and even surpassed the three saint factions in only about 1,000 years. However, the ancient documents also recorded that true immortals who lived in that realm had been to this continent as well, and they called this area the Deserted Sea Realm and had even created teleportation arrays that led to their own mystical cultivation world. It was said that in that mystical cultivation world, there were spiritual mountains, rich soil, and beautiful plants and flowers. Spiritual beasts flew in the sky, and spiritual plants grew all over the land. In that world, not only humans but demons had their own nations as well. People all thought that the reason why the three saint factions could surpass other factions in cultivation techniques and spiritual spells without fighting over any spiritual mountains or treasure cave abodes with them was that they had the access to the cultivation realm. In fact, there was another reason for their dominance, which was that they had once had dealings with those distant cultivators and obtained huge benefits. This was the only teleportation array that led to a place outside the Deserted Sea Realm. However, it couldn't be used since a long time ago, it seemed to have been destroyed from the other end. As a result, the regions beyond the Deserted Sea Realm had become a legend among the high-level cultivators in the three saint factions. If not for the catastrophe in the Taexa faction, they would have probably still taken it as a myth. After all, many years had passed, and the last group of disciples and elders who were teleported to the other end had never come back. Who knew if the world on the other end still existed or not? In the long river of time, the teleportation array had become a dead array. As time passed by, it was moved to another place for study. If the building storing these ancient documents was burned down in a fire one day, perhaps the successors would soon forget this piece of useless history, and everything about that period would vanish in the river of time. Long Yuan, Wanyan, you're the most valued and talented disciples in Xianzong Manor and the Yugzu faction. With the Taixi faction severely damaged, we're in a crisis and have many issues on our hands, which is why we entrusted this task to you. I hope that you won't disappoint us, the deist of the Yugzu faction who was wearing a white robe and a jade belt said slowly. How did your investigation go? The purple-robed old man of Xianzhong Manor stared at Li Longyuan and Ling Wanyan and asked succinctly, are they related to the people recorded in our ancient documents? Did they make things difficult for you? No, they didn't, Li Longyuan answered, but the stuff in this shop is indeed weird and amazing. They also have many delicacies such as milk tea and spicy sticks. Soon, the two disciples recounted all the snacks and games that they experienced. The newest and the most popular game they have now is Devil May Cry 3, which is a tough test for one's control and skills. Although the game mainly focuses on warriors, cultivators can play it too. When he got to the good parts, Li Longyuan talked while demonstrating Dante's wicked sword techniques and fancy combos in the Grand Hall, thinking that it was very dashing. The two faction masters looked at him and were at a loss for words. Their report and demonstrations lasted half a day. After they were gone, the two faction masters looked at each other. What do you get from their report? The law of time. While murmuring these 4 words, they fell into deep thought. There were demons in this world. While humans usually cultivate for less than 100 years, demons cultivate for at least hundreds of years. Except for the royal members of the demon clan, the other demons must cultivate a long time before they could transform into human forms. It took demons much longer time to increase their strength compared to humans. Likewise, the powerful demon clan usually enjoyed very long periods of power spikes. Whenever a powerful demon master rose, it would bring a very long time of prosperity to the demon clan. Of course, the demon clan's degree of prosperity was much inferior to that of humans. Demons were more like hermits in spiritual mountains, enjoying the life in the auspicious cave abodes hidden in all kinds of places and lingering in the ancient relics. In contrast, humans were more like explorers and conquerors, focusing on acquiring more land for generations without getting tired. Humans usually lived in prosperity and luxury while demons enjoyed beautiful scenes and things that were rare in nature. However, some demons liked the prosperity in the human world and came to the human civilization after transforming into their human form. In the vast ocean, the dark sky merged with the dark water. It was dark all around. Right now, it seemed like a storm would come at any moment. A majestic man wearing a silver robe with golden embroidered patterns stood on the ocean waves with a black patterned heavy Ji in his hand. TL note, Ji, a Chinese polyarm, is a hybrid between a spear and a dagger axe. He bobbed up and down on the waves as if he were standing on boat, and the surging black waves underneath couldn't affect him at all. Soon, several huge ocean beasts rose from the bottom of the sea, and they were extremely respectful to the man and didn't dare to do anything reckless. They looked humble naturally as if this man was their master, and they were his subordinates. With a deep voice, he seemed to be asking something, but it wasn't any human language that was used on the continent. His deep eyes gazed at the distance while a huge piece of land appeared from the horizon. In the original game, the lightning balls moved very slowly, probably less than 5 meters per second, and it could be easily dodged by any ordinary warriors in the shop, let alone Dante. However, the lightning balls in the remake version were different. Lightning balls could move at an unimaginable high speed of more than 20,000 km per hour in the real world, so it obviously followed the same speed in the game. For the cultivators, it was difficult for them to deal with these situations with the methods of warriors. Although the cultivators couldn't use these techniques, they were eager to watch Mr. Fang play. Different from the warriors in Zhuhua City who were working hard, practicing their skills, the cultivators in Half City were more interested in watching. At this moment, Divine Ocean Realm cultivators such as Black Demon and Tang Yuan, ordinary cultivators such as Mo Xian, and even Ning Bai were standing behind Mr. Fang and watching him play, each with a cup of milk tea in their hands. A quilt also floated in the air. I have high hopes for this guy. He has the presence as a member of our Saint clan. Then, it sipped the milk tea and said, "Damn, why is it so cold?" Since Mr. Fang didn't turn on the live stream, a large group of people gathered behind him. This devil tower was occupied with many horrid demons, and Dante encountered many battles in there. During the process, he acquired many weapons as well. For example, there was the moon goddess gun Artemis, a demonic gun which could fire demonic energy arrows. The creation principles of this gun were clearly different from that of the modern science guns. It was a real demonic gun. While the science-based guns in Counter-Strike, Resident Evil, and Grand Theft Auto 5 were basic guns, Ebony and Ivory, Artemis, and Ladies, a heroine in the game, powerful guns such as the multifunctional missile launcher gave the cultivators a clear direction for making advanced weapons. These firearms each had their own combat style. For low-level cultivators, regular guns were like god-tier weapons since they consumed little strength and unleashed great power. But for grand cultivators, these weapons could offer little help in major warfare, which was why they rarely used guns in their battles. However, the situation would change if they could produce the guns and combat styles shown in Devil May Cry 3. Mr. Fang controlled Dante to move forward while he got even more experienced with the battles in this game. While his techniques leveled up slowly, he could use many more combat styles, such as the Royal Guard style's air block in midair and the Gunslinger style's various fancy shooting movesets. After defeating the two headless knights of fire and ice who were known as Agni and Rudra, Dante acquired the ice and fire dual saber which were transformed from these two headless knights. These two sabers can even talk. The audience was pleasantly surprised when the terrifyingly powerful dual sabers asked Dante to take them with him after being defeated. Dante was thinking if he should bring them to play. After a moment of consideration, he said, "Okay. But you two are not allowed to speak." While he said that, he picked up the dual sabers that were engulfed in red and blue flames respectively. While he used them to strike, the red and blue flames danced in the Great Hall, forming a huge red and blue firestorm. Exclamations rose from behind Mr. Fang. The first battle with Virgil was even more astonishing. Virgil wanted to open the demonic tower and the portal connecting the human world and the demon world. As a demon slayer, Dante inherited his parents' love for humans, and he had a human side to him deep down in his heart even though he didn't admit it. Driven by their fates, the twin brothers with opposite personalities began their first battle on the top of the demonic tower. The soaring demonic tower was so high that it looked like the highest point of the world. It felt like the huge full moon hung beside the demonic tower, looking so near as if one could touch it by reaching out their hands. So, this is a so-called cozy family reunion, eh? Dante was still sarcastic and playful while Virgil looked cold and solemn like a merciless demon with his katana in hand. Dark clouds drifted over and vaguely covered the moon, and the wind fluttered the hem of his blue windbreaker while saber light flashed. Yamato's saber light was brighter than the moonlight, making the moon further away lose its glamour. Obviously, Virgil was more powerful than Dante, and he revealed a small part of his frightening saber techniques in this battle. Compared with Dante, Virgil's saber techniques were more orderly and disciplined. He drew and withdrew his saber like an elegant aristocrat who showed great power with aplomb. How come I feel like this guy is more dashing than Dante? Someone is more dashing than Dante. Where? More people came over. So fast. Virgil's katana was not only fast but was able to explode the Hell Vanguard which was hard to kill, causing demonic energy to disperse into the area. Virgil's saber looked like a death blade. The audience felt like they were watching a fascinating movie instead of a game. Of course, since Dante hadn't learned the devil trigger yet, he was no match for Virgil in this battle. However, at the end of the battle, even from the screen, the audience could feel the frightening explosive power that Dante unleashed after he controlled the demonic energy in his body. Obviously, this game was not only enjoyable to play, the viewers behind Fang Qi were having a thrilling time as well. Is this demonic energy? Humph! This little guy's power is still not as great as me, the Saint Lord. Gulp! Above their heads came the sound of someone drinking milk tea with a straw. However, his twin brother was more like a cold demon who was proud, admired power, and would do anything to achieve his goals. However, different from the cultivators of the major factions in the Morning Star Sea Realm and the cultivators and warriors of Dajan, the local players in Half City liked Virgil more. His disregard for trivialities to achieve his ambitious goal, aristocratic temperament and great power enthralled them. Of course, his slight short-sightedness due to the crazy pursuit for power wasn't that negative in the grand scheme of things. Meanwhile, the two cultivation worlds had begun studying the weapons in Devil May Cry 3. Dante had 5 close-range weapons. Besides the Sword Rebellion, the other 4 were the loot he got after subduing or defeating powerful demons. For example, in front of Dante, there was Nevin, a vampire witch who had red, wave-like hair and wore a black long dress. Devil May Cry 3 had a totally different focus from other games. The Legend of the Sword and Fairy focused on fate and love, Diablo 2 focused on the fun of combining items with various properties with techniques, Grand Theft Auto 5 focused on a novel lifestyle, Devil May Cry 3 focused on combat. Yes, combat. While Grand Theft Auto 5 satisfied the needs of most of the chill and relaxed players, Devil May Cry 3 satisfied the needs of the avid fighters. The vampire witch before Dante didn't only have the traditional vampirical ability of transforming into a bat, but she could also summon powerful bats as shields. More importantly, she could control lightning. Obviously, Mr. Fang got even better at playing the game, and he gave the audience a visual feast. The witch's powerful and swift attacks of bat shadows were almost all blocked by Dante with Royal Guard. Then, the bat witch summoned frighteningly powerful lightning currents which swept all over the room. With clinking explosions, Dante remained intact while the attacks of this witch were so fast that everything became blurry, and his demonic energy continued to grow. In the booming lightning flashes, Dante remained still and firm like a mountain, which showed the audience his frightening strength again. As the combat styles leveled up, they would reveal even greater power, including styles such as Gunslinger and Swordmaster, but clearly, the Royal Guard style tested the player's control of timing more than others. Fang Qi had accumulated a lot of battle experience in the various cultivation rooms and became more familiar with the combat styles through constant fighting. Besides, he had played the original version of the game and thus knew most of his enemies' attack styles and methods. For example, he perfectly knew how to deal with the witch's sucking of HP. His control of Dante had perfect timing, and the audience held their breaths while watching the fascinating battle. In fact, everything was so proper that people felt like it was Fang Qi fighting the monsters personally. Maybe, it could no longer be called a battle, but an enthralling symphony of sounds of lightning and winds created by the sword. For Dante, perhaps it was only a beautiful dance party under the moon. On the screen, the white light and red light mingled and exploded. The demonic power under Devil Trigger was instantly unleashed. Together with the power of the release, all the charged demonic energy was directed forward like an erupting volcano. Demonic energy surged up like a turbulent flood, and the audience saw red and white light exploding on the screen. Immediately, the red light shrank, and the exploded demonic energy was withdrawn. After appearing for only one moment, the Devil Trigger was stopped. The Bat Witch was now already lying on the ground. The audience was silent. After a long while, they finally found their voices and shouted, "What was that play?" It was release while Devil Trigger is activated. Mr. Fang waved his hand calmly. On the screen, the bat which had become a dark purple electric guitar in Dante's hands, and he played a piece of heart-throbbing electric guitar rock and roll music. The rock and roll music wasn't something that the cultivators and warriors could accept, it was way too modern. However, a large group of them had heard many songs such as Glorious Times and Vast Ocean and Open Sky in Mr. Fang's zone while playing the King of Fighters. They had gotten used to this kind of music. Awesome! So thrilling! Exclamations came one after another from behind. Obviously, it was another powerful weapon. Despite their great powers, these weapons couldn't be copied since each of them was a powerful demon. The most that they could achieve was a mimic version. At this moment, the demon bundled in the quilt found that the cultivators around it were looking at it with a weird look. It seemed like they were looking at this demon as if they had just discovered a new continent. It was just looking at the screen on which Dante was playing his newly acquired electric guitar, and it suddenly shivered. "Why are you staring at me? Do you think this one can be transformed into a weapon?" Yu Yan whispered. "I think so," Mo Xian whispered back, "aren't they the same kind? What weapon do you think this one can transform into?" They continued the discussion in low voices. The demon shivered. Mr. Fang explained, "This is a teleportation array, not a weapon." The demon said, Right. I'm a teleport." He paused while he was speaking, feeling like something wasn't right. "I say, old demon, do you have a relative or something?" Ning Bai suddenly giggled with a strange light flashing in her bright green eyes as if she had just discovered a gold mountain. "No. I have none." It almost stomped its foot even though it was a cloud now. Shotgun. Moon Goddess Gun, Artemis. It was a laser gun empowered by the demonic energy, and it could shoot purple laser beams. It had many kinds of attack methods including launching light balls that could trace the enemies. Spiral, a powerful sniper rifle. Kalina An, a multifunctional missile launcher borrowed from the heroine. The missiles had the thermal homing capability. In the Zhuhua city shop, people like Jun Yangzi and Li Haoran sat together and observed the guns. Jun Yangzi controlled Dante. When demonic energy gathered at the muzzles of the two guns and created red light, he fired. Boom! A giant wave of red light shot out from the muzzles, and the bullets sent a demon that jumped at Dante flying. "These guns are excellent." Jun Yangzi studied the guns in his hands with appreciation while nodding repeatedly. Meanwhile in the half-city shop. Almost every day, even if Mr. Fang didn't play on the live stream, the people who had finished playing games or were waiting for their turns would gather behind him. When he turned on the live stream, the audience was bigger. Some of them were full of questions for him. "Sir, how did you use Devil Trigger with release? Also, I saw you keep withdrawing the Devil Trigger after using it when you are killing small demons, why did you do that?" These questions came from Mo Xian. "I simply used Devil Trigger together with release. I used the Devil Trigger combo when fighting the small demons." "Sir, how come I can't defeat the Headless Knights, Agni and Rudra? Do you have a simpler method?" the Zika spiritual master asked. "The simpler method is to change to another combat style, don't use Royal Guard all the time," Mr. Fang said. Then, he thought, "You are a cultivator and want to use Royal Guard? You are looking to get beat. Sir, can we learn Devil Trigger with release?" Ning Bai asked earnestly. "In theory, if you have a pent-up force similar to demonic energy, you can learn it." The powerful demonic energy was stored and suppressed in Dante's body, so he could live his life like a normal human. The more suppressed the energy was, the more powerful it would be when it was released, which was why Dante's strength could afflict great damage to everything around him like a storm once he activated Devil Trigger. Then, Sensei Fang demonstrated the Devil Trigger combo, and he was now attacking a blood bird. Mr. Fang, who had turned into Sensei Fang, said, "Cultivators rely on spiritual spells to fly. Likewise, the birds need to flap their wings to fly. Now, I'll demonstrate the combo with this blood bird. He flipped up the bird with his sword. The moment before it fell to the ground, the demon bird had begun recovering its balance. In another instant, the demonic bird would regain its full balance, flap its wings, and fly away. Under Fang Qi control, Dante activated Devil Trigger, and the demonic energy that was gushing out from his body swept toward the demonic bird, making it look like a small boat in a turbulent ocean. It couldn't even control its own movements, let alone fly out of Fang Qi attack range. All this happened in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Fang Qi sword slashed out rapidly like a storm. The moves were done in sequences seamlessly, they would be flawless even if they were used in the real world. Fang Qi continued to explain, I always heard people complain that they couldn't hit their targets since they couldn't cast the more powerful combat techniques quickly, or that they could only suppress enemies with lower cultivation strength and couldn't lock down the ones with fast speed. Now, I'll teach you guys a very useful combo. Fang Qi stabbed his sword forward, and it was perfectly blocked by an elite demon. However, Sensei Fang wasn't surprised, he unleashed powerful demonic energy, forcing the demon that was in a defense mode to retreat. Meanwhile, he charged his strength and slashed out his sword forcefully before the demon could regain its balance. The sword energy strike that brought powerful demonic energy hacked the demon into two halves and sent them flying for 10 meters, leaving a deep cut in the wall. Remember, you must use your brain when fighting. If you are not sure that you can hit the demon, you must create an environment that can allow you to. Ugh! You seem to have a point. Wait. The problem is that we don't have demonic energy in us. Some of them suddenly realized this problem. How could they use the combo in the real world? Ha 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 ha. The usually despondent Shui Xianyun suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. Senior sister, what are you laughing about? I've found a good use for the demonic energy that can't be removed from my body. Shui Xianyun had been troubled by this, but now she realized that she must practice hard in Devil May Cry 3 to take advantage of her special talent. The others were silent with frustration, wishing that they could grow some special energy inside their bodies. Despite their frustration, they knew that it was something that they couldn't force to happen. They had to think of another way. For example, Sir, many people asked eagerly, how do we unlock the Quicksilver style? At this moment, Mr. Fang had killed his way to the 12th mission, and he was standing before the demonic horse, Geryon. Geryon was once a horse of legend ridden by countless heroes, but now it was a demonic beast who had learned spells to control time in its long life. It was now pulling on a carriage full of weapons and battling alongside it. Fang Qi Dante waved the big sword in his hand and stared at the demonic horse that was emitting blue flames. Today, I'll become a horse trainer. With his excellent combat techniques that were getting better, Mr. Fang's Dante couldn't be stopped by this demonic horse. After some of his dazzling plays, the demonic horse had turned into a blue flame hovering in the air. Blue flame of time. Then, the audience saw many boulders collapsing and falling from the ruined underground arena while a mysterious force spread out swiftly in all directions from Dante. Suddenly, all the falling boulders and everything around them began to move very slowly as if time had stopped. So powerful! Is this the force that can control time? The magical scene stunned everyone, making them temporarily lose the ability to speak. At this moment, Mr. Fang suddenly heard a prompt from the system, telling him that he had received a new task. New task, building Internet 2 task target, open branches in new and unknown places and build cross-regional Internet task reward, godly weapon fragment task time limit, 40 days additional bonus, cross-regional teleportation, usage, once additional bonus, gaming cultivation room, usage, 3 days. The second internet building task began. The man waved his hand as if he didn't like this topic. The top priority is finding the little princess. Besides, we must make the least possible contact with people in the deserted sea realm, understand? Yes, Your Highness, in Zhuhua City, the situation with the Zhuhua City shop was different from before. It was livelier than the half-city shop. The mild climate was only one of the reasons. Another reason was that Zhuhua City was a place cohabited by ordinary people, warriors, and cultivators, so it had busier streets and a bigger population compared to half-city. The Zhuhua City shop was located in the residential area of ordinary people. Each Monday and Tuesday night, some nearby civilians would gather in the shop to watch the TV series Jade Dynasty and Wind and Cloud. After all, the broadcast of TV series was free. Even though they could only see the plot and couldn't get increased strength, it was far more exciting and interesting compared to the stories told in the restaurants. In the city, almost every resident could retell a part of Jade Dynasty and was very familiar with the names Wind God Nifeng and No Cry Death God Buletin Jingyun. Since the major factions outside Dajin corrected their mistakes and no longer forbade their disciples from learning and making friends in Origin's internet club, the shop was always packed. People began waiting in line from the early morning. The royal princess in her long black royal dress was reading an exquisite, colored, hardcover book. A red demon face was printed on the black cover, Diablo 2. What are you reading? The fifth prince plunked down on the couch beside her with 2 cups of milk tea and handed one to the royal princess. The last volume of the official hardcover edition of Diablo. While sipping the milk tea, she continued reading the book. Although I haven't played the game yet, the story is fascinating. Following the Dark Wanderer's footsteps, they fought their way to the Hell Forge and destroyed the soul stones of the Lords of Hell. This is a legend of heroes that we can only see in the myths. She asked casually, didn't you play this game? Yet. But in the game, we must experience nightmare difficulty to see the real hell, the fifth prince said with a shake of his head. I have just passed the easiest normal difficulty. The higher I go, the more difficult it will be. Anyway, only Duke Nalan and a few others are playing hell difficulty. It's really hard. It's said that in hell difficulty, players have no restrictions and can use any martial art techniques or spiritual spells and combat techniques that they have learned in the shop. Is that true? The royal princess asked while turning to another page. Almost. They have gotten used to using skills such as the sword control technique with the energy in the game. Despite all this, they still can't clear the stage yet, they are all stuck in Act 2. Obviously, in Hell difficulty, Diablo 2 had fully reinstalled the original power for Enduriel, Duriel, and the 3 mighty lords of Hell. For most of the players, even if they were equipped with powerful items and had high skill levels, they would be hindered if their own cultivation strengths and realms were low, and the game progress would be very slow. The royal princess sipped the milk tea while she read the end of the official novel of Diablo 2. Baal and its demon legion were finally defeated by heroes, and the polluted world stone was also destroyed. Despite the destruction of the demon legion, the home of the barbarians was also destroyed together with the demon legion at the world stone chamber. The whole world plunged into chaos after the destruction of the world stone. After closing the book, the royal princess sat on the couch and looked at the sunshine outside the shop, slowly savoring the content. I wonder what lives the heroes will have in the future. Will the only surviving barbarian hero rebuild his homeland? I wonder if there are more stories about them. She curled her lips while she thought about it. Then, a tall figure came to the entrance of the shop and blocked the sunshine that was shining through the glass door. The shop was bustling with people, and it wasn't strange to see customers going into the shop. After all, as the shop's reputation spread, many disciples of major factions and forces including the 3 saint factions came to visit the shop, which explained why some strange faces would occasionally show up outside the shop. However, Royal Princess Jiyu found that she couldn't tell what cultivation style this man had. Even though this man didn't try to hide his aura and presence, she couldn't connect the mystical sensation to any factions or forces. There was a mysterious and proud sensation on him, and she didn't know how to compare that to the people of the 3 saint factions. The most puzzling was that this man released an aristocratic presence, which wasn't ostentatious but could be felt in each of his casual moves. It was an innate nobility deep in the bones. He was about 30 years old and was wearing a silver robe with luxurious golden embroidered patterns. Looking at his bigger than usual size, Ji suspected that he was a warrior, but then she found that the contour of his face was softer than the tough features of ordinary warriors. He didn't look like a weathered warrior but a well-maintained cultivator. He was flanked by 2 men who looked like his guards. "Who's this guy?" the 5th prince whispered. "No idea." The royal princess frowned. "How come I feel like he isn't here to get online? Is he here to make trouble?" "Make trouble?" Hearing these 2 words, the other cultivators sitting on the couches looked over. While they stared at the newcomers, the latter was staring at them as well. They saw some seniors inside with bowls of instant noodles in their hands or spicy sticks between the chopsticks in their hands. Lan Mo, the Wu Vidaist Alliance master, was sipping milk tea with a straw. Noticing the situation around him subconsciously, he looked up with widened eyes. Su Tianji slurped on the instant noodles and got a mouthful. Then, she looked up nonplussed. "What's wrong? What's happening?" Everyone suddenly fell silent. "Your Highness," the 2 guards glanced around the shop and said, "this place feels weird." "Ahoy!" The silver-robed man nodded. Instantly, the atmosphere got tense. "Are these 3 guys here to make trouble?" Su Tianji asked with a mouthful of instant noodles. Her question couldn't be heard that clearly. "Master, I think it's highly likely." "Slurp." Fang Qi replied while eating instant noodles as well. "With me sitting here, who dares to make trouble?" With a snort, Nalan Hongwu sipped his milk tea and instantly sighed in pleasure, feeling a warm flow of essence enter his body. Then, he stood up from his seat. Before he could speak, a small head stuck out from behind the computer on the counter. She blinked her big eyes and said, "Big brother." "Royal." "Little sister." The man looked pleasantly surprised. "Ugh!" All the people who were brewing for a fight froze. "Is he your big brother?" They all gaped at Zhang Xiaoyu. Zhang Xiaoyu immediately selected all the cute pictures of her on the desktop before uploading them into a private folder in QQ. The icon of QQ, which was a penguin wearing a red scarf, was jumping. She quickly clicked it open and saw that Mr. Fang was still talking to her about the combo and techniques in Devil May Cry. She sent a message to him. "Boss, we'll talk later, Husky's cute face, ... Then, she jumped out from behind the counter. Not sure about the situation in this shop, Zhang Xian cut to the point with a solemn expression, "You just slipped out without a word. Do you know that in the past year, our Fa..." He had wanted to say His Majesty but quickly changed to, "How much our Lord Father has been worried about you." Ahem. Nalan Hongwu lightly coughed and said, "This girl has stayed in this shop for a long time without seeing any dangers or being bullied. You can rest assured about that." "I know that." This man's manner and tone were impeccable, but perhaps due to his innate nobility or some other reasons, he sounded proud and cold. "I'm afraid that it's beyond the abilities of the cultivators of the deserted sea realm to bully little lady." The 2 guards sounded contemptuous. "Ugh! What deserted sea realm?" They all looked at each other in puzzlement. However, it didn't stop them from hearing the slight and contempt in the tone. Many people slightly frowned. Zhang Xian stared at Zhang Xiaoyu and said, "You've been outside for so long. It's about time to return." Hearing the word return, Zhang Xiaoyu was instantly displeased. She said with a pout, "No. I don't want to return to that cold and quiet place." More importantly, she wouldn't be able to play games and eat the delicacies of the shop if she returned. Zhang Xian got serious. "With your identity, you shouldn't have stayed with these cultivators." The 2 guards also tried to persuade her. "Little lady, how can you stay in this nation of mortals? With your status, it's not right for you to stay here. Please come back with young master." Zhang Xiaoyu averted her face, refusing to go. Our Lord Father talked to Master Long of the Heavenly Academy and enrolled you for the spring term next year. Zhang Xian shook his head and said, I'm on your side, but our Lord Father wants you to return and go to school in Heavenly Academy. Go to what school? Zhang Xiaoyu was even more reluctant and said in a loud voice, I don't want to go to school. I have been fine staying here, why should I go to school? Zhang Xian said solemnly, the enrollment in Heavenly Academy is very important, if you don't go, the consequences will be huge and not only affect you. No. I won't go. Holding her arms before chest, Zhang Xiaoyu was stubborn and yelled, why must I go? If it's important, Dad can go to school himself. Zhang Xian's face twitched. Are you serious? I don't want to go. I won't go. Hey! At this moment, Su Tianji said, if this girl doesn't want to go to the Heavenly Academy, she can stay here. Why must she go there? Yet. Lan Yan muttered, I've never heard of the Heavenly Academy before. If she must go to school, she can go to our Ling Yun Academy. With her talent, Xiaoyu will definitely be put in Class A. Right. Zhang Xiaoyu agreed to this suggestion immediately. If I must go to school, why can't I go to Ling Yun Academy? Why must I go to the Heavenly Academy? Ling Yun Academy. The three newcomers looked baffled. Zhang Xian asked, what is the Ling Yun Academy? Zhang Xiaoyu pointed out the door. Over there. It's one of the biggest academies in Dajin. Zhang Xian. Nonsense. He slammed his hand on the desk and said angrily, what do you think Heavenly Academy is? How can you compare it with a tiny warrior academy for ordinary people in this small country? Why not? Zhang Xiaoyu said earnestly, I like Ling Yun Academy very much. The people in it have talent and are good game players. Why can't I go to Ling Yun Academy? Ye Xiaoyu walked up to her side and whispered, you're right. Or you can come to our Cloud Ocean faction. Why should you go to the Heavenly Academy which I've never heard before? I don't know if it's a good school or not. You're a frog sitting in a well, it's ridiculous that you don't even know about the Heavenly Academy, one of the guards said with a snicker. Is it very good? Ye Xiao looked puzzled. Is it in the area around Half City? Humph. Do you know that the cultivators of Half City have to beg for artifact-making techniques from our Wu Vi Daoist Alliance? What Half City? The guard snickered, the Heavenly Academy has existed since the primitive era. The disciples of the Heavenly Academy include not only princes and princesses from all cultivation countries but masters and elders of the ancient families such as Xian Yuan and King Kaiu, let alone the famous legendary cultivator Wang Zixiao who studied there. Who's Wang Zixiao? I haven't heard of him. The people in the shop looked at each other, having not heard of the Heavenly Academy nor the ancient families named Xian Yuan and King Kaiu. Daoist brother Li, Ling Wanyan whispered, isn't that spiritual master in our ancient documents called Zixiao spiritual master? I think. Li Longyuan looked shocked. I think, you're right. Are they? The both of them looked shocked. Are they people from the other realm? Are they people from the place recorded in our ancient documents? Zhen Yan. Zhang Xian gave the red-faced guard a hard look. It's not necessary to say these things. I'm sorry. Young master. Zhang Xian looked at Zhang Xiaoyu and said, do you know why our Lord Father asked me, your older brother, to come to this place? He knows that you're stubborn and willful and will not come back willingly, so he sent me to fetch you. While shaking his head, he sighed slightly. Our Lord Father told me that I must take you back even if you don't want to come back. Ugh! The people in the shop looked at each other, thinking that it wasn't right to interfere with the internal affairs of a family. However, they didn't think it right to stand back and watch either. They had no choice but to send a message on QQ Song Ching Feng, Sir. Bad news. Someone wants to forcefully take Xiaoyu from the shop. Husky's baffled face, what do you mean by someone wants to forcefully take Xiaoyu from the shop? Mr. Fang was still busy showing off his skills in Devil May Cry 3. Don't bother me. Don't you want to help your Xiaoyu? Soon, Su Tianji also sent a message to him. Mr. Fang was baffled. This girl is at the age to go to school, so it is nothing unusual for her family to take her to school. How come someone scared me, saying that she is being taken away by force? Su Tianji froze for a moment, thinking that he had a point. No. Her face turned dark since that she had almost agreed with Mr. Fang. She will be taken to a place named the Heavenly Academy that I've never heard of before. Xiaoyu doesn't want to go, but her family is determined to take her back anyway. Ugh, Mr. Fang finally exited from the game. After some consideration, he replied, it seems that I can't do anything about it, right? Do you want me to beat the people from her family? Do you think it's a good idea? Then, he grabbed the big quilt that was floating above his head. Hey! Why are you grabbing me? Yells came from above. We'll go to Zhuhua. We are finally going to Zhuhua. The old demon was elated and excited. Go! 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 Hurry! I'm so cold here. In the Zhuhua city shop the atmosphere was tense. I say, what's happening? Mr. Fang walked down the stairs, followed by a cheerful dark cloud without the big quilt. Obviously, Zhuhua city was much warmer. Boss! Seeing Mr. Fang, Zhang Xiaoyu looked as if she had found a savior. Immediately, she hid behind him. What's wrong? Mr. Fang was nonplussed. They are here to take you to school, right? I graduated from elementary school at your age. There's nothing to be afraid of. Can't I go to a school nearby? Zhang Xiaoyu snorted. What's so good about the Heavenly Academy? If it's so good, Dad can go there himself. You are, Zhang Xian stared at the man before him warily. He wasn't worried that his little sister would get bullied in the deserted sea realm, but he was afraid that she might get tricked by a weak and ignorant cultivator. Oh! He's my boss! Zhang Xiaoyu snorted and then begged pitiably, Boss, if I'm gone, who will keep an eye on the shop for you? I don't want to go to that school which is so far away from here. Hearing her words, Zhang Xian's face turned dark as he realized something that he didn't pay attention to before. What did you say? You are keeping an eye on this shop. You are too willful. Zhang Xian snorted and said, I thought you just sneaked out to play, but in fact you've been a clerk in this shop. I plan to give him some protection and get some fees, Zhang Xiaoyu mumbled. However, Mr. Fang didn't need her protection, so she had to act as a cashier and keep an eye on the shop. After a while, she just didn't want to leave. Zhang Xian's face turned dark at the thought that she, a princess, had come to this place to be a shop clerk. It was a disgrace to the Zhang family. If our Lord Father knew about your antics, he said with a snort, he will probably send troops over and raze this small country of mortals to the ground. Go home with me now, and I will probably pretend that this didn't happen and not report it to our Lord Father. Ji Wu, who was passing them with a bowl of instant noodles in his hands, was at a loss for words, and his face twitched, wondering why people kept threatening to raze his dajin to the ground. Who did he offend? Zhen Yan whispered beside him, however, the shop owner looks to be a despicable man, and we must teach him a lesson. Otherwise, the princess will, okay. Zhang Xian nodded. This despicable shop owner had ordered the princess to do low tasks such as keeping an eye on the shop for him. It was unforgivable. Of course, if they knew that Mr. Fang didn't pay Xiaoyu for her work for 3 months, they would probably want to kill him immediately. Zhen Yan, Zhang Xian said coldly, you go and find out what abilities this owner has, how dare he be my little sister's boss? Girl, Mr. Fang turned around and stared at Zhang Xiaoyu. Then, he bent down and pinched her cheek and said, you are just making trouble for me. With a pout, Zhang Xiaoyu looked at Mr. Fang imploringly and said, I don't want to go to the Heavenly Academy, please help me." Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. Zhang Xiaoyu added, "I'm your employee. If I'm gone, who will keep an eye on the shop for you? You must do something." The guard named Zhen Yan smirked. "I advise you to mind your own business and not to interfere with other people." Mr. Fang shrugged and replied, "I don't like minding others' business, but since this girl calls me boss, it is not proper for me not to do anything for my employee." Hearing the word employee, Zhen Yan's face turned chiller. There was an old saying that the subordinates must die when their master was insulted. Perhaps it didn't mean much to others, but as a servant of the royal family, he took it as a great insult that this young man from nowhere dared to call the princess his employee. With a cold contemptuous expression, he said, "Grand Ancestral Warrior Realm? I won't bully you, I'll battle with you with the same power of your realm. What do you think?" "Ugh!" Mr. Fang nodded immediately and said, "Good. We'll pull our punches when the point is made to avoid severe injuries. Let's go outside." "Okay." Zhen Yan seemed to have a higher opinion of him and said with a nod, "It's good that you don't overestimate yourself." Zhang Xian's face was always cold and unreadable. Hearing the conversation, the faces of the members of the audience in the internet cafe twitched. "I think he doesn't understand that Mr. Fang doesn't want to cause him grave injuries," Lan Yan whispered. Song Qingfeng said, "He really has no idea." Su Zixin added, 3 seconds of condolence for him. They walked out of the shop. Zhen Yan grinned. "A warrior? According to what I know, warriors can't fly at the Grand Ancestral Warrior Realm, right?" He stretched and said, "Then, I'll fight you on the ground." He beckoned at Mr. Fang and said, "Come on. I'll admit defeat if you can even injure me slightly." Mr. Fang's face twitched. "This request is stepping over the line, don't you think so?" "Stepping over the line?" Zhen Yan's gaze was even more contemptuous. "Then, I'll admit defeat if you can touch the edge of my clothes. Are you satisfied now?" Zhang Xian frowned slightly as well. He had thought that this Mr. Fang must have had some abilities, but now it seemed like he had been wrong. However, Mr. Fang shook his head and said, "No. I'm afraid that you will lose in the blink of an eye. We can't call it a proper fight then." "What? Arrogance. Today, I'll teach you a good lesson, you arrogant and black-hearted shop owner." With a chilly expression, Zhen Yan yelled in a fury while his aura expanded explosively. When the people around him looked surprised, Zhen Yan revealed a little of his smugness. "The people of the deserted sea realm are ignorant, my bite of devouring flame is enough to deal with the cultivators here even without the assistance of any spiritual spells." At this moment, Mr. Fang slowly raised his right hand, holding a bright red flame. This flame wasn't ostentatious, and people didn't even feel its heat. "Shiki Orakai Nagi," many people in the audience exclaimed. "How come I don't feel any power in his Shiki Orakai Nagi?" Song Qingfeng said in surprise. Zhen Yan's lips curved up. "You have it coming!" He yelled in a fury, "Bite of devouring flame!" An explosive flame surged up like a huge wave and transformed into a dragon made of burning flames. It opened its huge mouth and bit at Fang Qi. Meanwhile, Fang Qi arm only waved. "Stupid!" Zhang Xian shook his head, thinking that the technique with the strange name Shiki Orakai Nagi was quite weak. At Fang Qi wave, the flame shot out from his hand. However, feeling the slight heat from the flame, Zhang Xian's expression suddenly changed drastically. Different from others' cultivation methods, Fang Qi mainly obtained his pure cultivation strength through playing games and the synchronizations with the characters through the movie and TV series Cultivation Room and Game Cultivation Room. With his talent, he would obtain more benefits in playing games than cultivating like others. The strength that he got from the system was very pure. In theory, it could adapt to any changes. However, he needed synchronization practice if he wanted to unleash the same level of power as those in the game. Since Mr. Fang planned to follow the path of a warrior, he had worked hard on all close-range combat techniques, let alone Kyokyuzanaga's desperation move, Shiki Orakai Nagi. The people around him couldn't feel the heat of his flame since all its heat energy was concentrated in his palm. Don't reserve your strength! Zhang Xian yelled out a warning. Faced with such a technique, reserving strength while fighting at the same realm was seeking death. What? Zhen Yan's face turned grim, and the dragon before him suddenly looked even livelier as if it were a real dragon. With a roar, it viciously crashed toward the curtain of flames that Fang Qi pushed toward him. When the two burning flames collided, Shiki Orakai Nagi finally revealed its extremely high heat energy, even gradually melting the ground beneath their feet. Feeling an overwhelming heat wave surging toward him, Zhen Yan's eyebrows and hair were almost seared off. After piercing the biting flames, Shiki Orakai Nagi's heat wave forced Zhen Yan to retreat repeatedly. If not for his strength, which was much higher than the grand ancestral warrior realm, he would have been wounded. Go! Go! Boss! Zhang Xiaoyu clapped her hands and cheered. Use Shiki Orakai Nagi first and then show him the ultimate desperation move, Mu Shiki. Mr. Fang! Do you still have ultimate skills? At this moment, Zhen Yan finally turned serious. I didn't know that I would meet a young man like you in the deserted sea realm. With a snicker, he shook his head and continued, however, I can't take back my words, if I lose to you, a young man in the deserted sea realm, it would be a great humiliation for me. Watch! With a loud yell, he said, I'll use a great technique to fight you, showing you that the huge gap between us is too large for you to cross. Mr. Fang replied, Ugh! I understand that. No. You don't understand, Zhen Yan said while shaking his head. Otherwise, you won't continue with this futile struggle. He brought his hands together before his chest, forming a mystical spell seal one after another one. The sky behind him suddenly dimmed. Vaguely, people seemed to hear ocean waves coming from the distance. That sounds got closer, and it sounded as if huge and turbulent ocean waves were surging behind him and slapping boulders. It felt as if a deep and dark abyss stood behind him instead of the sky. Then, a black dragon shadow leaped up from the turbulent waves behind him and soared up into the clouds. It was a true dragon. Admit defeat. A gust of black wind swept across the land and Zhen Yan's wild laughter was empowered by the booming noises of the rumbling thunder in the sky. Giant, bean-sized raindrops fell, and it looked as if a real dragon was flying in the sky, creating rain in the clouds. The horrible suppression sent chills down the spines of the people standing around them. This technique comes from the true power derived from the depths of my ancient bloodline. Although I only understand one trace of it, ordinary cultivators who are even a large realm higher than me can't block it. Zhen Yan's gaze was as cold as that of a wild beast. Do you understand the gap between us now? This. With his hands in his pockets, a sword spirit suddenly dashed into the sky from Mr. Fang's body. With aloof eyes, Mr. Fang seemed to have merged with the sword spirit and transformed into an ultimate heavenly sword. I learned this sword spirit from a senior who can only play the erhu, even though I only understand a trace of it, Mr. Fang said, but ordinary cultivators might find it difficult to move their weapons when they face me. Zhen Yan. A senior who can only play erhu. What nonsense is he talking about? People thought to themselves. Zhang Xiaoyu also looked puzzled. Who is the senior that can only play erhu? How come I've never seen him? Nalan Mingxiu said, haven't you discovered that senior no-name likes to stay home and play erhu when he was at his prime? He came out to the world when he had only 10% of his strength left. I wonder if he is the senior who the shop owner is referring to. Heavenly sword, no name, Su Tianji said with a nod. This sword spirit should be it. As soon as she said it, a wave of dense sword shadows appeared in the sky. It formed a curtain of swords, covering the sky. Even from far away, they could feel the overwhelming sword spirit contained in each of the swords. Even more horrible was that the sword spirit emitting from the young man in front of him gave Zhen Yan a feeling that he could cut the sky into two halves. If this attack fell on him, Zhen Yan probably wouldn't be able to block it with his full strength, let alone the strength of the Grand Ancestor Warrior Realm. Impossible. Zhen Yan didn't believe that a warrior in the deserted sea realm could be so powerful. "You're bluffing," he said with a snort. "I'll see how long your bluffing can last." Swoosh! 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 The moment that he said those words, many flying swords dashed down like the raindrops in a storm, and the silver sword lights looked like a river of swords pouring from heaven. When the many flying swords whistled past his ears, the stunning sword waterfall dumbfounded not only Zhen Yan but Zhang Xian, as well. Is he really a warrior from the deserted sea realm? They suddenly felt like they might have come to the wrong place. Nalan Mingxia whispered something at her ear. After many flying swords passed him, the ground around Zhen Yan was turned into a dense forest of swords. Only the ground beneath him was left intact, leaving a blank area that looked like the shape of one person. Dazed, Zhen Yan stood on the street while drops of sweat fell to the ground. At this moment, it seemed like it was extremely difficult to raise even a finger. "Who on earth are you?" Zhang Xian's face fell, and he looked at Fang Qi as if the latter was a monster. "Is this the Grand Ancestral Warrior Realm?" Suddenly, he felt like he couldn't understand the people standing around him. If the Grand Ancestral Warriors were this powerful, he wondered how powerful the King Warriors and Emperor Warriors were. Impossible. He comforted himself silently. It is impossible for other people to be as powerful as him, one is already shocking enough. However, he had clearly heard them mention a senior named No Name. It sounded like they were all familiar with the so-called Shiki Orokai Nagi. At this moment, he saw some people getting restless in the crowd. Song Qing Feng raised his right hand and condensed some flames. "The shop owner isn't as dashing as me. Watch my Shiki Orokai Nagi." Lin Xiao looked disdainful. "Shiki Orokai Nagi is nothing. Watch my innumerable sword scroll." Then, dozens of flying swords rose behind him. Zhang Xian and his guards were stunned. Liang Shi commented from the side, "Shop owner's heavenly sword spirit combined with the innumerable sword scroll indeed resembles the feeling of Senior No Name. He indeed has some of the magnificence of Senior No Name. I still think Senior Nalan's sword 23 that day is more powerful." He even suppressed space. All the people in the four-symbol grand array couldn't move or escape, even the Divine Palace Realm cultivators almost got killed. He got about 50 to 60% of the old sword saint's power. These newcomers' faces turned uglier while they listened to the conversations among the audience. It is still no match for shop owner's Orokai Shockwave or Orokai Divine Light. I wonder if shop owner has mastered Dante's control of time yet. It's said the shop owner has acquired the blue flame of time, maybe he has mastered the control of time. Zhang Xian. Zhen Yan. The other green-faced guard, Xueming, was also at a loss for words. They were almost stupefied due to fear. How come these people were each more powerful than the next? Leaving other aside, they can even suppress space and control time. Have the people in the deserted sea realm developed to this high realm? Zhang Xian had planned to take Zhang Xiaoyu with him by force. But now, judging from the gazes of the people around him, he knew he had a low chance of succeeding. According to what he had known about the deserted sea realm, he had thought that he could go and leave however he wanted. But now, he got himself ready for the worst-case scenario while coldly staring at Fang Qi. He had thought that the deserted sea realm was just a small fish pond, but it turned out to be the home base for dragons and tigers. He raised his hand, and a black patterned heavy Ji appeared in his hand. The atmosphere around them turned chilly and grim. Growl. At this moment, a weird sound appeared. All the people looked toward Zhen Yan. Zhen Yan looked embarrassed. After all, he hadn't had the time for a meal in the long journey. He had been fine, but he had sweated profusely with this scare, he wasn't able to control this stamina and energy that well now. He sniffed. This rich sour fragrance smells so good. What is it? Zhang Xiaoyu handed a bowl of instant noodles to Zhang Xian. When he opened the lid, the sour fragrance was even richer. On the golden noodles were a layer of crystal-like pickled vegetables. The fragrance and the appetizing colors could even tempt fasting cultivators who weren't supposed to eat, let alone the demons who had big appetites. Growl. Zhang Xian's face turned dark. Here. This is the most delicious instant noodles of our shop. Zhang Xiaoyu's big eyes curved up like the crescent moon with her smile. Besides its fragrance and rich flavor, the instant noodles can purify the spiritual essence in your body. I even prepared it for you. Zhang Xian stared at the noodles with widened eyes. Fine. It seemed like he finally found a way out of this difficult situation. With the heavy G in his hand, he said with a dark expression, I'll deal with you after eating the instant noodles that my little sister prepared for me. Humph! He gave Mr. Fang a hard stare. After swallowing one mouthful of the instant noodles, his eyes widened. Wow! So delicious! Slurp! Slurp! The two guards swallowed their saliva repeatedly. We have more in the shop. Mr. Fang said, you are guests from a distant place, so the noodles are on me. But you must prepare them yourselves. Soon, 3 more people appeared on the couches in the ship, and they were devouring instant noodles with loud slurping sounds. I'm surprised that you're so smart, girl. If not for the instant noodles, the situation would probably have turned worse and become harder to deal. The practice fight might have turned into a fierce battle later on. After all, they couldn't afford to humiliate the Zhang family. Mr. Fang didn't like thinking too much, and it was clear that Zhang Xiaoyu was also a girl who never thought of consequences. Sitting on a couch, Nalan Mingxia was enjoying her milk tea. She turned her head and saw Zhang Xiaoyu give her a victory sign with her hand while showing 2 small canine teeth. On the other side, how can it be? Such a delicacy. It's a precious delicacy in the world. Zhen Yan yelled, I'm surprised that there's such a delicacy on this tiny deserted land. While sipping the soup of the noodles, Zhang Xian looked serious as well. While I eat the noodles and drink the soup, I sense that the spiritual essence in my body is being refined. It's a high-level cultivation method. Zhang Xiaoyu handed them each a bottle of Coke. Gulp. Gulp. Spicy sticks. Milk tea, an hour later, sir. Do you have more food or beverages? Bring them all to us. We can afford them all. In fact, my big brother has a very big appetite. My dad told me that when my big brother was little, he had once stolen and eaten all the spiritual herbs of a major faction. When he got home, Zhang Xiaoyu whispered some little secrets about her big brother to Mr. Fang. When she told Fang Qi the information, she didn't look at her own small round belly at all. Mr. Fang yelled, no more. You have to wait until tomorrow if you want more. What?